Okay, good morning. Welcome again to this Unica Scholarly Communication Workgroup Seminar. Thank you for being here today again. I hope you enjoyed just today's session. I think we had an interesting variety of topics addressed. And today we will have I guess, really interesting and encouraging sessions on very different topics like licensing issues, like the impact on PLANES on the university libraries, and also on copyright issues. Let me start this day presenting and introducing Wilhelm Wittmark. He is the library director of the Stockholm University. And also he's a member of the European Open Science Cloud Association. I think his point of view is unique for us for helping understand the landscape of open access, open science in Europe today. I think his experience and his commitment with open access will provide us with a lot of engaging and exciting ideas. So Wilhelm, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raoul. I will share my screen. So I'm Wilhelm Wittmark, and I'm one of the directors in EOSC Association, and I will talk a little bit about what EOSC is and what is the possible rules for libraries in EOSC. So where do we come from? Why do we discuss the European Open Science Cloud? It is a shared vision between the European Commission, the member states, and the associated countries, and a large community of people. The decision of the governing bodies to institute a co-program partnership as the best instrument to collectively achieve the vision. Before, the European Commission had a lot of projects on EOSC, but they had not a steering body to make it work completely. So then we started the association. And the governance model is rather complex, of course. It's agreed within European Union countries for the next EOSC implementation phase after 2020, and will be a triplet, including the European Commission, the European research community represented by the EOSC Association, and the EU countries associated with Horizon Europe through a steering board. So we have the European Commission, EOSC Association, and the steering board that will lead this work together. So this is a really complex picture of how the partnership structure will work. On your left side, you have the EOSC Association with its General Assembly, the Executive Board, and the Executive Director. And we have the steering board in top of the EOSC Association. Then we have all the projects there that will lead things to different parts when we start to build EOSC. So we'll have EOSC Core in a couple of years. We will start working on it this year. And then we'll have different services and different projects that will come to this EOSC Core. And we have from all members will contribute and all member states will contribute, and we have the national funders, and we can have commercial service providers inside of this. So this is a really complex work we are doing now and setting it up. The EOSC Association had its first General Assembly last year, and we then had an evaluation and got this steering board. And the mission for EOSC Association is to advancing open science to accelerate the creation of new knowledge, inspire education, spur innovation and promote accessibility and transparency. It's to provide a single voice for advocacy and representation for the broader EOSC stakeholder community, to promote the alignment of European Union research policy and priorities with activities coordinated by the association, and to enable seamless access to data through interoperable services that address the entire research data life cycle, from discovery to storage, management, analysis, and reuse across broader and scientific disciplines. And we have started the association, and we now have about 230 members in the association. As you can see here, I'm really glad that very many research performing organizations are members now. As you can see on the left side, it is around 120 universities and research performing organizations within the association. Then we have service providing organization and research funding organization. So this was the status in 2020. I think we have received about 40 more members in the organization. EOSC will be a web of scientific insight, a web of fair data and related services, a federation of relevant existing and future services, a virtual space where science producers and consumers can come together, an open-ended range of content and services, and with a quality mark, data made in Europe. Priorities for the implementation in 21 to 22 is to ensure that open science practices and skills are rewarded and thought, becoming the new normal. We won't talk about open science anymore, it's science again, but it's open. Enable the definition of standards and the development of tools and services to allow researchers to find, access, reuse, and combine results. Establish a sustainable and federated infrastructure, enabling open sharing of scientific results. To do this, we have started a lot of different task forces and advisory groups. This will be a structure to allow association members and others to help steer the implementation of EOSC. Groups should liaise with EOSC projects and offer feedback. Identify strategic gaps and areas for investment to input to the SRIA. And advisory groups are an umbrella for a set of task forces that are highly related and have the same EOSC association liaison person. And here we have the 5 advisory boards. It's implementation of EOSC, technical challenges on EOSC, metadata and data quality, research careers and curricula, and sustaining EOSC. When we went out to our members and asked to join the task forces, we got about 400 members wanting to be part of one of those task forces. So we have task forces on PID policy and implementation, researcher engagement and adoption, rules of participation, compliance monitoring. We have fair metrics and data quality, semantic interoperability, data stewardship, curricula and career path, research careers recognition and credit, and upskilling countries to EOSC. Defining funding models for EOSC, long-term data preservation, AAI architecture, infrastructure for quality research software, and technical interoperability of data services. So you see, it's a really broad range of questions we have to discuss to further evolve the EOSC. A discussion about what can EOSC and libraries be and what can libraries do in EOSC. We had in the winter, we had a discussion and 6 different workshops where we discussed with researchers, librarians, and different people, how could libraries engage in European Open Science Cloud. And some of the conclusion was that what we could advise libraries to do is to position themselves within research institution as a core partner to engage in EOSC. Libraries can talk to the university management on the importance with data sharing and a good handling of the data for the researchers. And then libraries can promote the university organizations to engage in EOSC and even be members in EOSC. You could create specific EOSC working groups within your networks to discuss how you can handle this. We can partner with computer services to provide new services for our researchers. And research libraries should introduce new staff roles to address research data management, such as data stewards, data curators, and maybe data librarians. It's very important for the researchers to have professional people working with those skills to help them comply with all the different rules and help them to manage their data and how to share the data. And I think that libraries are really suited for this. And I think all over Europe, many libraries are working on this at their universities. Libraries could develop training programs on research data management. And I know that many libraries are doing that. They can continue to guarantee the provision of content with high quality metadata. That's one of the specialities of the libraries, to work with high quality metadata. And research libraries could be a key to connecting EOSC with core user communities. It is the libraries that have the best connection with the researchers that can discuss EOSC with the researchers and explain what EOSC is. So this was some advices for libraries how you can engage with EOSC. And now I think it should be a 10 minutes question and answers. So thank you.
Thank you, Wilhelm. Thank you for your detailed presentation on EOSC, and with so many interesting ideas on the challenges of the current landscape in open science. So any questions on the chat? I think there was somebody who raised her hand, but the question is not on the chat. Any questions? No questions? Well, let me ask you, Wilhelm, one question related to librarians reskilling. It's one of the things that you have mentioned in one of the last slides. How do you think both EOSC on their side and also the libraries and the universities from their other side try to achieve a new model of librarian competencies in order to reskill them in dealing with the new challenges of open science?
I think this is a really important question, and I think we have to work within our library communities about this. I know that LIBER is doing a lot of talking about how we can reskill our staff. And I think like in Sweden, we have a national discussion on what new skills are needed at the libraries to help the researchers in the new landscape. We have the open science landscape with both open access to articles and monographs, and then we have the whole landscape with data curating and everything like that. So within EOSC, one of the task forces is really working on the curricula for data stewards. What is a data steward, and how can libraries employ data stewards to work on this? And I think this is really a needed discussion within the universities with the top management. How can we help our researchers? What skills are needed? So this year, for instance, at Stockholm University, we hired 2 new data stewards, and it was a decision from the university management, because we had a discussion. This will be a big burden for the researchers if we can't help them, and we need to help them to make this happen, because it's really important that we handle our data in a good and a secure way, and that we can share the data that is possible to share.
Okay, thank you, Wilhelm. No additional questions on the chat. Let me ask you a new one. Another thing that you mentioned is to partner the computer services, the IT services at universities. And depending on the organization of universities, some libraries have their own IT staff. Some other have just maybe librarians with an additional specialization on IT issues. Some others just have the central IT services, and they help libraries in whatever they need, but libraries don't have a dedicated IT team. I think this is one of the maybe challenges that many universities need to address, because we need support from the IT services. They are the experts, the actual experts in platforms, in servers, in protocols. What's your experience in the relationships between libraries and IT services in the examples you know?
Well, I think this is a very important question, and you described the landscape very well. It differs from all research libraries if they have their IT inside or at the central unit at the university. At Stockholm University, we have IT within the university, and we have central IT services, and we work together on this. So I think it was in January, we launched a platform for managing the data for all the researchers at Stockholm University. And this was a co-creation with the central IT service and the IT service at the university library. And I think this is really, the libraries need to promote this question, and we need to discuss this with university management to help steer it, because it's not an easy task to do. Then I think we shouldn't invent everything on each university. We have to work together. So in Sweden, we have a framework how we can work together to build these services. And if we don't build services for storing and sharing research data, we need to buy it from the providers, and then it can be much, much more expensive than we have done with the articles. So if we handle away the data handling to the publishers or other commercial providers, it will be very, very expensive. And I think we need a plan S to get the data back in that case.
Okay, thank you. Really, really illuminating. And another question. Maybe I didn't understand it well, but if I'm not wrong, you didn't mention copyright or licensing issues in your introduction, and these are two topics that we are going to address today. Libraries, I think in general, started playing a role in advising in these topics. What do you think are the most important challenges with regards to this new landscape of open science, and in terms of copyright and licenses?
Yes, within EOSC, we haven't discussed that really much, but it is an important question as well. What license should you put on your data, and how should you do it? So it is a discussion you also need to have at the university level, because you need to have people that understand legal matters that can help the researchers with all the questions they get. So I think both when you put licenses to your article, and you should put licenses to your data, and you have to, the researchers need to get information how to choose. And I think Christina will in this afternoon talk a little bit about licensing when we work with open monographs and things like that. So it's of course a living question as well, and gets it even more complicated, of course.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have the feeling that, let's say 10, 15 years ago, libraries were like pioneers in open science, in open access. In that era, we talked only about open access, but now we are talking about open science, which is enhancing the level of the debate and of the project. And yesterday there was one question that was what's first, or what's more efficient, like the culture change or the policies. I think we have the opportunity in this seminar yesterday and today of understanding these two dimensions, because we are talking about individual initiatives by universities and libraries, as well as from some international frameworks like the European Commission or like this association. So we have, I think, a big picture of what's going on right now. 10, 15 years ago, there were no policies, or there were few policies. Are now maybe in the risks of having too many policies or too many frameworks. So what's your opinion about that?
Yes, I think the most important way to reach open science is the cultural change. Of course, we need to have policies and we need to have discussions about it. But I don't think that, when I was at another conference, one in the audience asked me, why should we bother about EOSC? It's just a library question. And I think that is one of the mistakes that libraries has onboarded open science and work a lot on open science, but many think that it's only a library question. But it's definitely not only a library question. It's not a library question at all. It is a question for all the researchers. But it is easy for the researchers to feel like this is just politically driven. It's by EU, it's by the government of Sweden. They put burden on us. And I think there we, like libraries, need to talk about why should we change? Why should we have a cultural change? What are the benefits for the researchers, and what could the researchers do with this? So I think the most important is to get this as a researcher-driven question, not a top-down question. It would be a bottom-up. Then you need to have policies and things like that, but I don't think you should start with the policies. I think you should engage the researchers at your universities in those questions. And you need to have the university management with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Wilhelm. I like that idea, working on the top management level and also working on the researchers level, which are the core of what we are doing every day at the libraries. Okay, so thank you very much. Well, there are no more questions. We are a little bit ahead of the schedule, so that's great, and maybe we can proceed with session 3 on licensing issues, transformative agreements, and beyond. This is chaired by Françoise Van Doren. Françoise, are you there?
Yes, I'm ready to take over. Thank you, Raoul. So this third session of the Scholarly Communication seminar is devoted to licensing issues, transformative agreements, and beyond. And we will have 2 presentations of 15 minutes each, and we will have time for questions afterwards. So please ask your questions via the Zoom chat, and we will address them afterwards. So our first speaker is Krzysztof Sewicz, and he is coordinator of the project Library of Science at the Interdisciplinary Center for Mathematical and Computational Modeling at the University of Warsaw. And Krzysztof contributed to a thorough study of transformative agreements, and he's going to share with us the results of this study. Krzysztof?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for your introduction. Thank you for having me here. I'm not sure how do you want me to show my presentation. I could share my screen. Perhaps that would be the best option because I could switch the slides myself.
Yes, Chris, you can share your screen. I mean, you should be allowed. Otherwise,
okay. Do you see my slides?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
And now is it okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So as you already introduced, I would like to share the results of our study that I contributed to together with my colleagues from ICM. And we also were supported by people from outside of our team. You can see their names on the slide. They provided us with case studies from Germany, Sweden, and Norway. And the report, we published it earlier in the year on our webpage. You can see the link here. It's in English, so you can refer to it for any details that I'm not able to present here. And we the report is structured in the following way. We started with describing the context for transformative agreements given in Plan S. We then proceeded to presenting what is the current status of transformative agreements, in selected countries. And there was also legal analysis that I performed together with our other lawyer, Nikodem Rycko. And we used the agreements published in the ESSEC registry. And we also included the case studies, and we took the analysis from the case studies to formulate our recommendations, and the legal team also provided some legal recommendations. And some details that I want to show here is that, well, the Plan S, as far as how we understand it, it starts with a conclusion, with a statement that open access outperforms subscription-based models, and in the long term, subscription-based models should not be used. However, in some shorter period, in some transitional period, we should have a tool that would, as it is in the transition, that would serve for the transition to full open access. And of course, publishers and the publishers who the publishers play an important role in the whole system, and we don't want to get rid of them just like that. And Plan S provided for, well, allowed to use transformative agreements for specified short period, provided there is transparency and that either the agreements or in general there is some stipulation for for how we convert to full open access after this short transition period. But generally, Plan S, as I think about it, is quite flexible. Although there are some details clarified in later published guidelines and frequently asked and answers to frequently asked questions. And as I was the co-author of the legal analysis, I would now skip and focus on the findings of this legal analysis. What we found was that generally the lawyers tend to start with trying to clearly define what's the subject matters. So we had started with a question: what exactly are those transformative agreements, and what is some kind of a defining criterion for the agreements gathered in the ESSAC database? And we came up with something that you see, this quote that you see on this slide, that these agreements that we saw, that we analyzed, are amendments or modifications to traditional subscription contracts. And these amendments boil down to some additional terms that allow eligible authors to benefit from open access, and the cost of that operation is paid for by the contracting institution, and eventually, in the end, by the taxpayer. And we found three types of contractual provisions in these agreements, and I would like to share here our findings regarding the first one, which are I think most relevant to this meeting today. So these are the provisions that specify how eligible authors should be identified. And usually they are identified by their affiliation with the contracting institution, or even more broadly with, for example, institutions having their seat in the given country. There is, of course, an issue of co-authors who are sometimes non-eligible under under the contract, under the agreement criteria. So sometimes contracts, sometimes these transformative agreements provide how those persons should be treated. And we also had this thought during the analysis that this issue of who is eligible is indirectly impacted by the list of covered journals. So for example, if you include more journals from a given discipline in the list, then of course you somehow you provide some kind of a bias towards authors that publish in a given discipline. But this is, of course, this impact is not easily measurable. Then there are provisions that specify what terms the publisher should offer authors who apply for open access. So this means that the contracting institution in the agreement with the publisher agree what, for example, what license options should be given to authors. And this results that, similar to the traditional approach, authors do not have much choice on their own what type of, for example, Creative Commons licenses they can apply for their papers, and these provisions are are either more specific or more broad, but generally this is an issue that is regulated in the transformative agreements. There are also some provisions regarding the workflow, which here I'm talking about what is the exact procedure for the authors who would like to opt in for the open access publication, how they are identified, how they are informed about such a possibility. And this is actually a very important issue because this is something that we put in our recommendations, that so maybe I will leave it when I discuss the recommendations. And one other important type of provisions is perhaps maybe the most important from the practical point of view, is the calculation of publishing fees, because the devil is in the detail, because generally the construction is that the contracting institution pays for authors to be able to put their papers in open access, and there are usually some bulk sums agreed for example, for a given year. But then there is a question how this sum is cleared is settled in the details. If, for example, the authors do not deliver the exact number of papers, of if this number is exceeded, what is the procedure if, for example, some journals are removed from the previously agreed list. There are a lot of questions here, and transformative agreements approach this issue in many different ways. And of course, we present those different approaches that we found in the report, and then we came up with the following legal recommendations that I list here, and they are also elaborated in the report. Well, generally, starting from the issue of fees and how we calculate it exactly, that when you draft and you negotiate a transformative agreement, you should not you shouldn't just agree on the sum that is being paid to the publisher, but you should provide some procedure for calculating maybe some additional payment, or maybe some return of the money, or maybe some kind of forwarding the unused sum to next year, because in practice the exact the exact sum of money depends on the exact number of articles that are being submitted in a given year, and the more detail you looked into possible things that may happen during the year, the better you can specify how this money is exactly being calculated and paid. Then we thought that this issue is yes. I see that someone has a question. Pavlos.
I think we'll take questions afterwards.
Okay. And, okay. So then we recommended that some effort should be taken to prevent discrimination of non-eligible co-authors, because, well, generally if an institution agrees to pay for the eligible authors, some agreements provide that co-authors should either receive some discount, but this, I think each contracting institution should analyze in detail what is the, for example, taking some statistical historical data into account, what are the, for example, what is the setup of co-authors in a given country, and what would be an impact of financing payments only for the selected eligible authors. These are things that should be taken into consideration. Then we thought that, which is actually composition of list of covered journals is a recommendation in, I think, every contract with publishers, not only when it comes to transformative agreements, but what we found in some contracts is that there was a list of journals agreed at the time the contract was being signed, but then, for example, the publisher was able to change this list during the term of the contract, and sometimes we thought that maybe the procedures should be in place that would require at least some consultation with the contracting authority, because at the end it's again the question what is exactly being paid for and who has done, and whether the publisher has some possibility to change it afterwards. In some cases, for example, I think there were provisions that the publisher could remove some journals from the list if the copyrights to journals were transferred to another publisher. And I think it should be a other way around. I mean, the contracting institution wants to have certain journals included in the scope of the agreement. So this, I think, should be rather the obligation of the publisher to have the rights necessary to provide this journal. But of course, I understand that during the term of the contract, there could be some changes, but the contracting institutions should still have something to say whether it agrees or not to any changes. Then we thought that we should, well, encourage contracting institutions to provide for some minimal standard for what are the publishing contracts that publishers offer to authors. I mentioned earlier that the transformative agreements already specify some, for example, Creative Commons licenses that authors are being offered. Well, we know that Plan S requires that copyrights should remain at the author's side. So I think this is also, transformative agreement is also a place where we could put such an obligation on publishers. And again, I would encourage institutions to use transformative agreements as a tool for providing some kind of minimal standard in the sense of what is the rights that authors are given to use their publications on their own, what is the minimal standard of openness in the legal sense that is being required from publishers, and so on. There is we also recommend that the way when the contract is already performed and being performed, and how the authors are informed that they are eligible, how they are identified, whether this information is easily available, whether the author should provide or take any additional steps to opt in for open access. These are or important issues. And I think that the more the more things an author has to do, the more administrative burden for opting in, the less it is possible that authors choose this option. So transformative agreements could go into some detail, providing maybe for some kind of working contact with publishers and the institution on how this procedure of identification and opting in is realized, is performed in practice. Yeah, I already mentioned that depending on how we specify how we calculate the money, how we calculate the number of articles that are eligible, that are covered by the fee, what happens when there are not enough articles, whether this money can be used, for example, in the next year. These are all important issues and they should be covered. And the contracting institutions should really analyze and decide what they want to buy with this money. There is also an issue, a kind of side issue that we identified. I mean, statutory user freedoms in copyright laws, we have limitations and exceptions. There is an issue of text and data mining, which is not clearly covered by limitations and exceptions in many countries, and sometimes okay, to keep it short, I think that transformative agreements, so the time when the institution agrees with the publisher not only about the rights and obligations of the contracting party, but also about the rights of the authors and also of the readers, what the readers are getting as a result of the contract. And given the fact that, for example, text and data mining is a very important way of doing research now, but still not clearly regulated in the law, I think that this is also an opportunity to have it clarified with the publishers. What is their, what is the scope of, for example, text and data mining that they are allowing, how the parties understand that what the users can do under the statutory law, what the copyright allows them, because the scope of limitations and exceptions is also sometimes subject to different interpretations. And in the end, we recommended that the parties should also take into account the long-term availability, perhaps agree on some kind of external archiving of publications that, for example, that the publisher stops for any reason, stops to make available. And just to finish, and especially with regards to what my colleagues who are not here would probably want to add to what I said, is that well, generally we analyze transformative agreements, but at ICM we believe that this is just one of many possible mechanism that can be discussed in the context of open access. For example, and this is actually our case, the service that I coordinate at ICM is a public library of open access journals and publishers, mostly such that are affiliated with the Polish institutions, but also from the whole region of Central Europe, and these are diamond open access journals. And I think this is something that is an important part of the whole puzzle. You don't have to have transformative agreements with the publishers of these journals. They are already open access. They do not require payment for open access in the sense that is being used in transformative agreements. They are financed mostly with public money, and I think we shouldn't forget about those. We should also think what are the other platforms and repositories that can be used to provide open access. And generally, well, my friends and I would like to leave you with the questions that are here on this slide. And we think that the whole discussion related to transformative agreement is an opportunity to not just make a transition without changing the pillars of the whole system, but also to question what in the current system of scientific publishing we could change, what is working, what is not working, what open access allows us to modify. Okay, so that's all what I prepared for today, but I would be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Yes, of course. We will, please write your questions in the chat and we will take the questions after the second presentation. Thank you very much, Christoph, for your really interesting presentation and reflection about transformative agreements. So now I have the pleasure to welcome and to introduce Maria Haraki, and she is the permanent secretary at the Cyprus Libraries Consortium, and she will talk about the impacts and the benefits of this consortium. Maria, the floor is yours. Can't hear you, Maria. I have to switch on your mic.
Sorry about that.
Yes, better.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the introduction. I just want to check if you can see my screen. Can everybody see?
No, Maria.
No.
We cannot see your screen.
Sorry, one moment.
You try? Are you trying again?
I'm trying, but okay. Sorry, one moment.
Otherwise, I can try out. Okay, yes. Now it's working.
So can everybody see the screen?
Yes, it's working now.
Okay.
Yes, it's working now. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this presentation will describe the creation and development of the Cyprus Libraries Consortium and the process of formulating its own agreements with publishers. So insufficient funds, lack of organization, danger of overlapping information resources create a slow growth rate and obstacles in the provision of information material by academic libraries to their users. Realizing these problems, and in order to avoid them, the Cyprus Libraries Consortium was created, comprising of 7 members, with its main action limited only to subscriptions of electronic resources. Although setting up a consortium can provide many benefits, the CLC has also acquired its legal entity to better process its administrative and cost actions. Furthermore, criteria will outline the reason for choosing services and electronic resources from publishers. Benefits and negotiations with publishers will be discussed regarding the existing subscription packages and the possibility of transitioning to transformative agreements to support open access publishing. Further development and future actions will be mentioned in order to emphasize that the CLC is not a static organization and will continue to evolve and enrich its activities. The history of the universities in Cyprus is recent. The University of Cyprus, which is the first public higher institution in Cyprus, was established in '92. It officially became a member of the HELINK consortium in February of 2000. This initiative paved the way for the Cyprus University of Technology and the Open University of Cyprus to follow, and they also became official members of HELINK in 2009. This was a big achievement considering that the CUT and OUC only began to accept their first students in 2007 and 2006, respectively. In parallel, the three universities created the Cyprus Academic Libraries Consortium with the purpose of subscribing to additional resources and services that could not be covered by the HELINK membership. Also, as members of HELINK, we did not have the opportunity to choose whether or not to participate in a deal. The publisher deals were for all the HELINK members without exception. The three public universities of Cyprus paid a pre-agreed percentage for each deal. Due to the world economic crisis, Greece was faced with economic uncertainty, and consequently, this created many challenges for HELINK and its members. This is why, in 2013, the Cypriot universities withdrew from HELINK based on a mutual understanding. Since the three public universities of Cyprus, CUT, UCY, and OUC, were no longer members of the HELINK consortium, something had to be done in order to maintain their electronic resources and to continue to be able to serve their respective academic communities. Despite the economic difficulties Cyprus was facing due to the restrictions and implementation measures imposed by Troika, the CALC, Cyprus Academic Libraries Consortium, expanded in 2012 to include private universities, who meanwhile already had their own consortium and collaborations with publishers. And the process of formulating its own agreements with the existing and new publishers had begun. When the direct cooperation with the publishers started, the public university's participation in HELINK was used as a starting point for the negotiations. The financial crisis in 2013 also contributed as an argument in the negotiations with the publishers. Initially, the publishers were not willing to accept the collaboration between the public and private institutions. However, after extensive discussions, the publishers realized and accepted the fact that they had to consider Cyprus as a small country and with the number of students as a whole in order for any deals to take place and for everyone to benefit. The newly named Cyprus Libraries Consortium consists of 7 founding members, 3 of which belong to the public sector and 4 to the private sector. They are listed here on this screen. According to the decision of the Council of Rectors in June 2018, the president of the CLC, according to the statute, is a primary professor from one of the 7 founding member institutions. The CUT Library was also appointed by the CLC Council to be the coordinator of the negotiating team for agreements with the publishers. The 7 founding members are represented in the CLC Council with the right to vote. Electronic resources have become the mainstream format for academic libraries, and the CLC has moved to direct contacts, negotiations, and final agreements with more than 20 recognized publishers and suppliers of scientific journals and electronic resources. Although setting up a consortium can provide many benefits, it demands a big commitment from all the members. In order to be better able to process its administrative cost actions, the CLC has completed and acquired its legal entity in 2018. This action aims to help the CLC to operate as an official non-profit company. The legal entity outlines the main terms and objectives, thus making official all the actions of the CLC in relation to the deals made between the publishers and the members. Without a legal entity, important managerial constraints are created, such as no autonomy, no dedicated budget, no management of budget and staff, etc. On this screen, you can see the criteria for choosing services and electronic resources from publishers. From the main criteria, you can see that, for example, obtaining depth of coverage and perpetual access is very important. And from the additional criteria listed, obviously, the great cost of these journal subscriptions made the consortium more necessary. Each library sets priorities and determines collection needs in relation to its budget, which is allocated by the university board. The Cyprus University of Technology is officially the coordinator regarding the correspondence and negotiations with the publishers. The dissemination of cost per member institution for each deal is based on a formula created by the library directors and agreed by the Senate of each member institution. The formula takes into consideration the full-time equivalents of the members who participate in a specific deal. I now present just some examples of the benefits. So in the framework of this, there are cases where certain existing consortium members participating in a deal have benefited from additional members joining. This chart you see presents the total number of participants per year involved in all of the 16 deals between the consortium and publishers regarding electronic journal packages. So as you can see, the chart line shows a steady increase over the last 8 years. The next slide, for example, in the case, we list 3-4 examples of publishers. In the case of Springer and Wiley in 2013, the only participants were the 3 public universities. While researching the interest of the rest of the CLC members to participate in the renewal of 2014, only 1 private university expressed an interest in Springer, namely Frederick University. Regarding the interests of Wiley, only the University of Nicosia was interested because it already subscribed to Wiley independently and was paying a higher amount in comparison to the public universities. Regarding ProQuest Central, only 2 private universities had a subscription. So the public universities were not so interested because they already subscribed to EBSCO, which covered their needs. Taking into consideration the above, the publishers recognized that there was no interest in the part of the private universities to participate in the Springer and Wiley deals. And so they decided to make an attractive offer to include all the CLC members. As a result, you can see from the chart, Springer's offer included all the members with a 19% increase on the original price. Wiley's offer included all the members with a 6.3% increase on the original price. And ProQuest offer included all members with an 11.4% increase on the original price. The combination of these offers from the publishers allowed the CLC to have full participation, increased content, and cost savings. According to this chart, it can be concluded that when adding a new member to an existing deal, it automatically implies more savings. However, it is not obligatory to participate in any consortium deals, and contribution is based on a library's ability to participate depending on budget availability and priorities. During the very difficult year of 2020, while negotiating with publishers the renewal agreements for 21, CLC began the discussions regarding the transformative agreements. So far, the CLC has already one transformative agreement in place with a publisher and another 7 which are soon to be enforced. We have approached all the publishers with whom we collaborate in order to understand their approach regarding transformative agreements. And all have shown us that they understand that this is the direction of licensing. We can say with certitude that each has a different approach. They understand that this is the only way to meet EU funders' expectations, and many of them, they try to increase their revenue by offering transformative agreements. Since its creation, the Cyprus Libraries Consortium has benefited very much from the negotiation process with the publishers. Everything to do with correspondence, license agreements, negotiations, invoicing, etc., has helped us acquire experience and knowledge, which has proven to be invaluable towards the development and communication among the CLC members and our actions and future plans. Such actions include the following points presented in this slide. The creation and function of a union catalogue of bibliographic records and the development of common cataloguing policies can contribute to the continuous education of library staff and the sharing of expertise. The joint implementation of technical infrastructure, for example, creation of electronic repositories, thematic portals, digitization and archive management. The systematic monitoring and adoption of international practices and standards in matters relating to the operation of libraries, quality issues, copyright issues, and the adoption and use of Creative Commons licenses or other similar licenses. Providing seminars for many users to maximize the use of information resources, and the provision of consulting services on library-related issues. The CLC can go beyond the academic sector and can contribute to the public sector also. For example, small government research institutions. It is our belief that the points outlined on the current screen, which relate to future actions, can help in the evolution of libraries. Finally, it can be concluded that consortia can help and contribute towards the development of libraries. In the case of the Cyprus Libraries Consortium, the collaboration amongst its members has helped by establishing a common policy on electronic journal subscriptions with the aim to promote rational growth of journal collections among partners, saving and access to a greater number of electronic sources, in order to meet the educational and research needs of the users of the participating institutions. Through the CLC's experience, maintaining good relations and strong collaborations with publishers help to overcome problems and obstacles. We also believe and aim to go beyond the academic sector and contribute to the public sector in general. However, a challenge that is of great concern is when universities have to withdraw their participation from subscriptions due to the lack of sufficient funds. Efforts to overcome this concern is the evaluation of usage of the electronic resources, which can help to prevent this from happening and minimize this risk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Maria, for your presentation and the benefits of a consortium. We now have 10 minutes for questions. I don't see any question in the chat. So if you have questions, please do write them in the chat and we can ask them to one of our speakers. If there are no questions, I have a question for Christophe. Are you still there, Christophe? Yes.
Yes, sure.
Yes, thank you. I wonder, what do you think? Do you think that the transformative agreements contribute to increase the market power of the major commercial publishers through these transformative agreements? Because researchers are invited to have the possibility to publish open access articles at no cost for them. Well, the university is paying, but not themselves, and they don't have to look for funding. Whether if they want to publish in a fully open access journals, then they have to find the funding for that. And we know that all the researchers do not have access to fundings for covering APC costs. So does this situation increase the power of these important commercial publishers on the market? What do you think about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that these agreements are a tool that can be used in to different outcomes, and depending on what are exactly the terms of such an agreement, this can be a risk, because if we, for example, institutions that enter into such an agreement fail to provide for any safeguards that this transitional period is actually limited in time, that if there are no, for example, if there are no safeguards that the fees can be increased next year, I think we should treat seriously what's in the plan as stated as this, that we are talking about short term for transition to open access. So I think that there is such a risk, and this depends on how this tool is actually used. And it's hard to say whether such a risk is in the agreements that we analyzed, because as far as I remember, they didn't have any provisions on what's in the next contracting period, for example. So it all depends on how the negotiations will continue with the publishers. So yeah.
Yes. And is there an engagement from the publisher through this transformative agreement to really reach full open access for their journals within a certain time frame? Is it also something that is indicated in the transformative agreements?
Yes, yes, that's important. That's an important thing that should be provided for. What is some kind of even maybe a deadline for a publisher to reach that? And my friends probably would add here that what I was trying to say on in my last slide, that it's not just about transformative agreements. It's what we do in all those other elements of the whole puzzle. How we treat diamond open access journals, how we use repositories, because I think that well, publishers play an important role, but they can also easily become gatekeepers of the whole system. And if we use transformative agreements and do not change the fact that they are gatekeepers, or if we strengthen this this role of gatekeeping, then we probably can end up even in a worse situation than before trying to switch to open access.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any question in the chat. So I will have a question for Maria. What do you think would be the major issues for your consortium when negotiating transformative agreements?
Okay, we're a small country, and I think the most important issue right now is that we've managed to understand the approach that the publishers have. And the aim for now was to encourage the academic community to publish. So by achieving a reduced rate on the APCs is something that we believe will start and will be encouraging. And we build on from there. But I'm happy to say that so far with 2 or 3, we've had decent proposal that doesn't require too much additional cost. And Christoph was saying something which is a good idea to consider, that if, for example, I have an offer from a publisher that says 10 articles per year or 20 articles, if we don't use that up, can we transfer it to the following year? I took note of that. So yeah, this is what we're trying to achieve for now.
Okay.
So, yeah, we build on.
Okay, thank you. I see a question in the chat from Raoul, so I will read it. When we think about transformative agreements, we think about the present and the future. That is, we think on current research and publications. What happens with publications from now backwards? How can we contribute to make historical research be open access to? Yes, indeed. Would any one of you want to reflect on that? Maybe Christoph, because it's related to copyright issues. I think so.
Well, yes, copyrights can be an obstacle here because publishers might not have sufficient rights to open such publications, and if they wanted to collect those rights, it's sometimes a cumbersome procedure to contact all authors or maybe even their heirs if the authors are dead. But this can be maybe addressed by the law, because we can think about some statutory exceptions from exclusive copyrights to when it comes to scientific publications. Well, it's also not an easy question how we can change the law here. Sorry, but I think this is also something that we could address in the agreement with publishers, and that's actually one of our recommendations, that when you contract now for the publications that the publishers have rights to or can obtain the rights to, you can already provide for some kind of long-term archiving of those publications. And of course, it's not easy to get back to publications from, let's say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but we can now start building some kind of mechanism for long-term availability and archiving of publications that are published now.
Okay, so far the publishers are requesting payment for having access to the archives. It's not on open access. So indeed, if it's possible to introduce this kind of provisions in transformative agreements, that would be good. I hope that libraries and consortia will have sufficient power or negotiating power to achieve this. I'm not completely convinced, but well, that's a possibility we can look into.
Maybe just one quick idea. Well, publishers might not be the only ones that actually have these historical publications, because what we know from our experience is that we can in ICM we contact authors, we can contact institutions that have scientific works of their employees in their own archives. This is also a question of copyright, who has the copyright, but we were quite successful in making available publications or scientific papers that we obtained from institutions or authors.
Yes, another possibility. I think it's now time for the break.
Sorry, Frances. Yeah, it's time, but since Moika also raised her hand, we can give a minute to her to ask a question.
Yes, of course, I didn't see, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I just want to reflect on copyright and archival rights. Publishers that own copyright sell it for many years. But in hard sciences, recent articles are used. And in soft sciences, also older articles. It means that when we come into predominantly open access era, the value of archives will be diminished for publishers. So they will not be able to sell this anymore so much. So even if publishers remain copyright holders, they can open access. It will not be fully open access, but it might be open to, free to read, gratis to read. Just some ideas.
We can hope they will go this way, indeed. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, we have a break now and we can restart at 11.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you, and see you at 11.
Thank you very much to you, and goodbye.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bonjour Françoise.
So it's 11. I think we can resume the meeting. We will give briefly the floor to Raoul to introduce the next session.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Now let's move to the Plan S. We have this session with 3 panelists. First, we will have Johan Roerik, Executive Director of Coalition S. Johan Roerik is a professor of linguistics at Leiden University, and he's also a founding member and president of the FAIR Open Access Alliance and Linguistics in Open Access. So I think he will provide us a very good view on the Plan S and what could be this challenge of gaining a full and immediate open access. So the floor is yours, Johan.
Thank you. So I'll give a brief overview of Plan S and Coalition S. Sorry. Yes, so Coalition S is an organization of 27 organizations worldwide now. It started, of course, in Europe, but it quickly expanded. So national organizations from Austria to UKRI. Also, the European Commission is part of Coalition S. There's also charitable foundations like the Wellcome Trust and the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in the US. We have global dimension with the World Health Organization, Jordan, Zambia, South Africa, and the African American Academy of Sciences. And if you count everything up, what you see is that we have, sorry, that's going too quickly, the coalition invests about $40 billion a year in a research fund, yielding about 150,000 articles a year, which is not much, but we know that these articles are articles that are well cited, that are very visible, and that are published in very highly cited journals as well. Why was Plan S devised? Well, the funders of Coalition S want to accelerate transition to full and immediate open access. This was born out of frustration, you could say, frustration with hybrid open access, because hybrid open access, as you know, journalists have subscription or 80% subscription, about 20% open access, is simply not providing the transition to open access. Funders have supported this system for 15 years. They didn't see any change, and they wanted to change this. You see some figures here that really show that these subscription titles that flip to open access are really, really small. These figures may have changed a bit also because Elsevier, of course, is creating a lot of new open access journals that are purely gold. What is the goal of Plan S? Well, we believe that all research articles funded by the money of Coalition S funders should be fully available and immediately available in open access. In the world, there's about 2 million research articles published every year. We believe that more researchers and new technologies need to be able to immediately access this to discover new knowledge. We've seen, of course, you see this, of course, with the obvious poster child of for open access, namely research on COVID, which has been openly available. And I think everybody agrees that without this open availability, many new therapies and insights about COVID would not have been possible. So Plan S is based on strong principles. Open access must be immediate, no embargo periods. The publication must be under a CC BY license. We want authors to retain their intellectual property rights and also allow others to use it if proper credit is given. No hybrid model of publication. I think that distinguishes Plan S and Coalition S from many other initiatives. Unless this hybrid model, unless the publishers give us a clear commitment that these journals will transition to open access in a defined time period. Pricing contracts and publication fees should be transparent and in line with services provided. We are working on that right now to make sure that those prices become available. This will become obligatory as of the 1st of July 22 for the publishers. And we are going to build a website for that. Funders also commit to support these publication fees. Individual researchers do not pay. And there is a commitment to assess research outputs based on their intrinsic merits and not their venue of publication. So we commit to Hong Kong principles or DORA. We do not favor any open access business model, so we don't think there's any silver bullet approach to open access, and there's rather a pragmatic approach of integrated policies at all levels of open access, I would say. I'll talk about that in a minute. We also seek alignment and coordination with other organizations, universities, LIBER, university libraries and university associations, and also the Confederation of Open Access Repository. We strongly believe that we have to do this together with other organizations. It's again, you know, we don't hold the single silver bullet to open access. That's why we're also in contact with publishers and publisher organizations about our policies, who don't like them always very much. And we are monitoring also how Plan S affects early career researchers, Global Young Academy, Marie Curie Alumni Association, and others. And we also have a global network of OA ambassadors who inform us about how Plan S is received in their field, and they share their ideas with us. 3 routes to compliance. I think this is more relevant to this discussion today. We have 3 routes to compliance. The first route is the easy one. And the expensive one, if you like, authors who publish in an open access journal that is indexed by the OAJ can publish there, and Coalition S funders will financially support the publication fees for the author in such journals. The route 2 is the most controversial one. That's for subscription journals and hybrid journals, namely authors publishing in a subscription journal must make sure that the version of record or the author accepted manuscript is instantly available in a repository on publication. And this is of course not financially supported by Coalition S funders. This is done by the rights retention strategy, which I will talk about in a minute. The third route is of course the route that is supported by the libraries and the library consortia, of which we talked about in the previous few hours. Namely, transformative arrangements of all sorts, from transformative agreements to S2O, any agreement that provides a transition from the subscription system to fully open access is something that we will support when possible. Some Coalition S funders do support that route, some don't financially. That really depends on national legislation and the legal status of some of these coalition members, of course. Let me say something about route 2, because that's the most controversial one, and also one that affects the libraries the most, which is of course also a focus of today. Coalition S grant holders are now required to, via their grant condition, to inform publishers that the prior CC BY license is applied to the future AAM arising from their submissions. So basically what we do is say to the authors, you have to say that this article is yours and that you will share it under a CC BY license. So you change the perspective. It's not the publisher who has the copyright. And then that earlier CC BY license takes precedence over later conflicting requirements in the copyright agreement. So we ask authors to add this statement to their submission, and they can then publish in any peer-reviewed journal, provided that the publisher allows articles in with this, doesn't just reject the paper and allows articles in. Then they can, after publication, they can publish the article in a peer-reviewed journal and deposit the CC BY license AAM in an open access repository in the ideal scenario. Sorry, that was too quickly. So Very importantly, since the CC BY license is in place prior to the publication agreement, that CC BY license will take precedence. There's, of course, some ways around this for the publishers, which we can talk about during the discussion later. So what is the most important here for me, at least, as a researcher myself, is that researchers take back control of the distribution and reuse of their papers. Of course, there's some publisher pushback. There's a few cases of outright refusal of submission, but what we see mostly is smoke and mirrors by the publisher. They steer journals from their journal of choice to APC OA journals, and they also distribute misleading information for researchers, like asking researchers to sign a contract to not disseminate the AAM in violation of their grant agreement. So basically, they're enticing researchers to break their grant agreement. And these are not, of course, there's been a reaction from EUA and CESAR in June about this. Rights retention and repositories, of course, the technical requirements for repositories have been elaborated in collaboration with COAR, and most repositories have been found to be on their way to compliance. So we think that the repository round is a robust answer to for the AAM, to make sure that the AAMs are deposited in repositories. And there's also now a service to make sure that the repositories can self-assess on their way to technical compliance. The third route is the route of the transformative agreements, the publishing models where the publisher is committed to transitioning submissions, subscription to open access. This is a model that we there's several kinds of these transformative agreements that you know, that some of you are involved in, the read and publish deals, but also things like subscribe to open, and also the model that we devise ourselves, namely the transformative journal model. This transition, of course, occurs at the level of library consortia, papers become gradually, journals become gradually more open access. Some funders contribute to these initiatives or are involved in the negotiations leading to these agreements, like for instance in the Netherlands. You can see that there's been a massive increase in transformative agreements, massive increase in open access articles. That's not just due to us, mainly due to the work of the libraries and library consortia, I believe. We also just, here are some figures about the transformative journal model, which encourages subscription publishers to transition to OA. This has now been accepted by a very large number of publishers in the transition to open access. So there's a commitment there to transition in a reasonable time period to OA. We have the journal checker tool. The journal checker tool allows researchers to evaluate how their journal of choice complies with planners. So by typing in the name of the journal, name of the funder, and the name of the institution, you know whether the journal is under a transformative agreement, whether you have to apply the rights retention strategy, or whether this is a gold open access journal where you have to pay for the fee, or where your funder will pay for the fee. JCT is very well used these days. We are working on price transparency. That's going to be the work going forward between now and July 22. We have 2 price transparency frameworks, as you may know, and I'm going a little bit faster because I see my time is up. And we are, because of competition law, we know that these figures will not be available for everyone, but we will have a set of approved users, especially, of course, libraries and library consortium members, who will be able to access these data. The problem is that publishers do not have to be prevented from accessing each other's data. And we hope that this will exert downward pressure. Then there's a few words about Diamond Open Access, because this was mentioned also before, free for authors, as you know, and free for readers. Non-commercial, we have commissioned this study on Diamond OA led by Opéras, which was very interesting, showing that there is in fact an archipelago of about 29,000 journals, not just in social sciences and humanities, importantly, and there's also there's a wide diversity of communities that is served by these journals, and there were a number of recommendations that we are going to take to heart again going forward. There's going to be an international workshop and symposium in 6 months, actually on the 2nd of February in Paris, mark your calendars. We are going to come up with a funding strategy in 20 months, and then we're going to think how to fund a Diamond Publishing Capacity Center. I'm going to stop here because my time is largely up. I'm sorry I went over it.
Okay, thank you, Johan. Very detailed.
As you know, I have to duck out now, but I'll be back soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for this detailed presentation. It's a pity we have so few time for extending and the explanations. Now it's the floor is yours, Mochka. Mochka, I hope I'm pronouncing correctly your name.
Actually, it's Mojca, but don't bother.
Mojca, okay, Mojca, I'll try. Well, Mojca Kotar comes from University of Ljubljana. She's assistant of the Secretary General, and he has a unique point of view because she's leading the negotiations with scholarly publishers for consortia agreements, and she supports public procurement of scientific journals. So now, Mojca, it's the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Thank you to UNIC, to organizers for giving me the opportunity to present some ideas of supportive libraries for Plan S at universities. As we have seen in Johan's presentation, Plan S principles are being adopted by many funders. And since universities are important research performing organizations, researchers need support. And I don't see any other unit of the university as a more natural choice to offer such support. Libraries have good understanding about scholarly communication business, but of course, Plan S principles do change things, and this is something that librarians will need to be upskilled to. Of course, there are no formal courses for this. The librarians will just need to learn in action by trying to provide the best conditions for their authors, their researchers. Researchers are very busy people, and even less demanding open access provisions from funders have proved, at least in Slovenia, to be difficult for them to comply with. So with Plan S, researchers will need more support, starting with explaining what the principle is and how it has to be carried out, complied with. So academic libraries are the ones that are negotiating with publishers on behalf of universities participating in consortia. And this has had a strong financial aspect so far, and this will continue, obviously. For the transition period, we are all engaged a lot, also in Slovenia, about transformative arrangements, and not so much in Slovenia about with agreements on open access publishing. At least we are trying to use the current subscription spending for transformation with legacy publishers. As Françoise has asked before, is this driving researchers to publish more with legacy publishers? Yes, of course it is. If the APC, if authors don't have to pay for APC, they would rather choose the legacy publisher journal than something, than an open access outlet there where they need to provide funding for APC themselves. But I have great hopes for transformation arrangements because they will at least help to transform a part of scholarly communication into full and complete open access. What I also find really important is that libraries, if possible, could spend some funding on supporting international or national open access infrastructures. And this is for the benefit of everybody, either in the region or around the world. Here, I think about Director of Open Access Journals, Sherpa Romeo, Confederation of Open Access Repositories, Open Access 2020. In Slovenia, we do have some transformative agreements, contracts signed with publishers, but this is definitely not enough to provide open access to all articles from projects. So I guess that rights retention strategy will become very important. And as I said before, authors in Slovenia are not very proficient still in open access according to Horizon 2020. And Plan S will be more demanding for them. So they will definitely need support with explanations on what this is and how to do it. Though I think that Plan S or Coalition S explanations published at their website are good enough. I mean, everybody, I guess, could understand this, but still there might be reluctance on the part of authors, fearing rejection of publisher if they demand, if they impose the holding of copyright on the author-accepted manuscript. Repositories are an important outlet in Plan S principles. Publishers, libraries typically manage repositories at universities. They will have to make sure, as Johan has shown, that these repositories become compliant with Plan S requirements. One area of activities, which at least in Slovenia is not very well pursued, is that libraries could act as publishers of diamond open access journals. I guess that this would mean they would support managing open journal systems as a software to use for publishing, and of course collaborate with editors from the scientific discipline and publishing such journals. I often hear that Plan S is financially demanding and that much more money is needed to comply with. We have seen from the Max Planck Digital Library White Paper, ordered in 2015, that there is enough money in the subscriptions communication system to convert completely to open access. And even if this APC, the standard APC, will be around 2,000 euros net, we would have like more than 40% remaining funding to invest in any other outlets. I guess this would be purely open access publishing outlets like platforms managed, owned by academia. One thing that can be difficult for libraries as providers of open access support is that they would have to provide support for many different open access policies. This would mean different workflows. Already now, with transformational agreements with publishers, we see that each publisher has a different workflow. So this can be demanding and difficult for authors to grasp. So I would really wish that all researchers would follow Plan S principles, whether they are required to do this by the funder or not, even if they carry out non-funded research, or even if there is no such institutional open access policy. From the situation that we have in Slovenia, I can say that our researchers are probably already a bit disadvantaged because we do not have totally all transformational agreements. Like in the Netherlands, this was done very well, and their researchers can publish in journals of many different, can publish open access articles in journals of many publishers already. So really, support for Plan S is needed, and this would mean that researchers around the world, not only in Europe, will have equal opportunities to disseminate their research. There is a must knowledge what librarians would have to know. Of course, 10 principles on Plan S principles for open access articles, then about monographs and how to comply with this. Compliance can, I guess, differ a little bit between different national funders, domestically and for Horizon Europe. But there are other tools that Johan has mentioned that are something that librarians would have to understand, would know where to use and how to use to get the most efficiency out of either transformative agreements or or support their researchers the best. I found some really inspirational blogs or information. JISC has already published their standpoint about what they will do to support implementation of HICRI open access policy, which is fully Plan S compliant. If libraries are unaware or have less experiences on how to approach transformational agreements, they're definitely advised to contact OA 2020 and refer to ISAC registry of transformational agreements and their analysis of publisher behaviors. I was very pleased to read this blog on observing the success of the rights retention strategy, where the author Ross Munz explains that many legacy publishers have already accepted articles under the rights retention strategy. I fully support Plan S and am really pleased and appreciate the effort and bold actions of this group of funders gathered in Coalition S. I think that this was really needed. They were learning in action as well while preparing all these principles. And I'm looking forward to the period beyond 2024, which I believe it will be fully open access already. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this really inspiring presentation. And I think one of the things I like most is that you have this hope of a real transformation of the landscape. So that's great. That's really inspirational, truly. Thank you. So now we go for the third and final presentation of this roundtable on Plan S and some case studies. Now we have with us Dominic Tate. Dominic Tate is the head of library research support at the Edinburgh University Library. His team is providing help and support for researchers and students. So I think he can also shed some light on how to assess the researchers, how to make them aware of all these changes that are really challenging our world.
Hey, thank you. Can you just nod if you can see my slides okay? Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. Well, thank you again for the invitation to talk to you today. I hope that what I will say will follow on nicely from what Mojca and Johan said. So I'm going to talk about our implementation of a new institutional research publications policy that's been designed to be aligned with Plan S. So firstly, a little bit about the background to open access in my institution. So at the University of Edinburgh, we've had a DSpace repository since 2003. That was superseded by Pure as our open access repository from 2011. We have block grants from UKRI, which is our main national funder in the UK. We have around £1 million a year to pay for for article processing charges. Now, if that were to just be spent, if we were to pay for everything that the university produces, that would be nowhere near enough, and I'll come to that a bit more in a minute. We also have about £500,000 from medical charities to pay for article processing charges. The university, though, locally, we have a preference for green open access over hybrid, or green or gold over hybrid. We don't like paying for hybrid. We don't see it as the way forward. We've been doing open access and supporting green open access for, well, since 2003, and we have now over 100,000 publications open access on our repository, which shows that over those 18 years, you can kind of slowly build things up. We have a REF open access policy, so this is to do with research assessment in the UK. So all research outputs have to be made open access on a green basis, with at least with an embargo, in order for them to be considered for assessment as part of the national assessment exercise. And that's really boosted our open access compliance to about 92%. That's taking in gold and hybrid and green with embargoes. So Moitza was talking about policies a little bit, and we suffer in the UK from a particularly difficult policy environment, which has evolved over the years. So the medical charities like Wellcome Trust, they've had policies since 2005. We introduced a kind of an institutional open access policy in 2010, very much strongly suggesting open access, but not really requiring it. I mentioned just then our assessment policy, which is a UK thing that's only been here for a few years, which has really helped to boost compliance generally with open access. There's the European funders policies, which are again very slightly different, and then of course there's UKRI, which has now been aligned to be a Plan S policy, and from April next year it's effectively a Plan S policy. So this provides a very, very difficult environment for our authors. I mean, some research projects can be subject to UKRI and Wellcome and institutional policy. So how do you navigate that? So what we want to do was to at least design something locally that would cover all of these policies. It might make things complicated for us in the library or for the administration, but if we can make things easier for authors, then that's a good starting point. So we've heard a bit about Plan S, and we have already started taking some steps towards Plan S. So last year we stopped paying hybrid article processing charges. I mentioned before that we're in receipt of about £1.5 million to pay for article processing charges, but it's just not enough for a big university like ours. So we've stopped paying hybrid APCs. We only pay for exclusively gold journals. And if they can't do that, then we suggest the author takes the green route. We are working with publishers on transformative deals, and there are a few that we've signed up to already. I've said that we've had a long-standing preference for green open access, but this is really where we needed to design a new policy. So this has only just been approved by University Executive this week. It's been a long time to get to this point. But on Tuesday, our university's senior management committee, University Executive, approved this new policy. And we have taken a kind of, I suppose it's a bit like the Harvard model of scholarly communications, a big focus on rights retention. What we've said is that authors own copyright in their work at the point of creation. Now, this is not something that's compatible with the kind of the default in UK copyright law. So in UK copyright law, normally copyright is with the employer in the case that something is written in the course of employment. But in effect, we've been waiving that right as an employer for 500 years now, because authors have always been signing agreements with publishers. They've always been doing what they want anyway. So we've taken a step to actually acknowledge for the first time and say that you, the author, owns the copyright at the point it's created. However, as well as that, upon acceptance of publication, each author will grant the university the right to, well, they have to make it CC BY, and they have to give us the right to deposit in an institutional repository. This is going to apply to all scholarly articles, so journal articles and conference proceedings. At the moment, we're not including monographs in this, although that is open for discussion further down the line. The authors should deposit their manuscripts in our institutional repository, and we should make the article open access at the point of publication. So we're not going to allow embargoes. And if something is CC BY at the point of acceptance, then it's open, and that's the point. We have provided an opt-out clause in case of difficulties. We're not really expecting to have to use this much, but if a publisher really wants to argue, then we will have an opt-out, but we will make it a bit more difficult. There are a couple of other things associated with the policy that we've got in there. So we've also put in we tried to tie together some other points about including data access statements for data sets associated with publications, making sure that authors use ORCID, and actually using the right address convention when mentioning the university. So saying University of Edinburgh, not Edinburgh University or Edin or some other thing that makes things complicated in the future. So we just got permission to actually launch this policy. It was quite some time in development. We looked at what was happening elsewhere in the world. We looked at the Harvard model, and there is a consortium of universities in the UK looking at adopting this called UK SCL, which is UK Scholarly Communications License. We couldn't quite get everyone together to launch at the same time. It was proving difficulty, so we were in a good position and we went ahead. We had to consult with the university lawyers and with university senior management. We really needed buy-in from senior management. We couldn't have done this without their support. We had to take a consultation through all of the different research committees in the university. That was quite time-consuming. We also had to consult with human resources and with the trade unions, so with the Universities and Colleges Union. The representatives in Edinburgh looked at it and felt that they needed to consult more widely, so it actually went to a national board in Scotland for approval. So this has taken us actually the best part of 2 years. I think at a previous Unica meeting I mentioned that I would be able to talk about this at this meeting, and when I volunteered, I thought that by now we would have implemented the policy and we would already be going with it. As it happened, it only just got in this week for approval. So we are going to launch in January. In terms of the implementation, we're just now finalising a communications plan. How do we talk to authors about this? What do they need to do? We also need to communicate with publishers. So we're in the process of our legal team writing letters to all of the big publishers that we deal with a lot, informing them formally of the new policy. It will commence from January 2022. We are going to have a kind of a soft implementation to start with. So there will be no local sanctions for any author that doesn't comply with this. But because the UKRI policy, which is Plan S effectively, is starting in April, we don't need to apply sanctions because actually UKRI the funders will be the ones applying the sanctions. Culturally, we know that in the UK, certainly institutional policies are not always adhered to. People feel, I don't know, somehow that they don't need to that they can somehow ignore this. But funder policies, they are adhered to, and funders are well placed to introduce sanctions for people who don't do this. So we are at the point of developing our communications and going for launch. So I would certainly welcome feedback from members of this group on our approach, and I'd like to keep in contact with you and wish us luck.
Okay, thank you very much, Dominic. There are 20 minutes left for finishing this part of today's sessions. This is a round table, so I hope there may be questions on the chat. There's no one, not yet. So please.
There is a participant who raised her hand, so I allow her to speak. So Paloma Jalk is there. No. But Moika also, in the meantime, raised her hand. So she...
Moika, okay.
Thank you. This is so good, Dominic. We're thinking about this in Slovenia, or at my university. We have the same copyright law that if you write something within the employment, the employer gets the copyright. So returning a bit back and forth and so on. I have a question about practicalities. So with adoption of the policy, this is it. Researchers employed with the university will not sign any statements or whatever. This is valid. It starts with January. Okay, great. Good luck.
Yes, so the way that it works is because the university has lots of policies about everything. There's a policy about parking your car. There's a policy about traveling abroad. There's health and safety. University policies change all the time. And everybody's contract, going back to people who've been employed here since the 1970s, 1980s, their contracts all say that that you must abide by, you must engage with the policies of the university. So there is a kind of a catch-all. So that was one of the first things we checked, was what we worked with human resources. What can we make people do? And it's like anything else. So if a university, if the organization wants to change something, then we can do that.
Okay, I would like to start with a question for the three of you, and maybe this is solved in Edinburgh because you are going to apply a policy. But imagine you are in the library trying to help young researchers to cope with everything because they are new to the profession. They are in the earliest moment in their career. They don't really understand, or they don't really know everything about open access. And they know they are really going to be evaluated by everybody in their university, in the country, and outside, of course. They know they need to publish in the top ranked journals with higher impact. They see that things are changing. So how can we, from the libraries, try to advise them? How can the university engage them in open access? Because they may see there's some kind of contradiction between trying to be as competitive as possible and publishing where their full professor were publishing yesterday. And on the other hand, we are forcing them to do many new things. Who's the first one? Johan or Moika? Dominic? Okay, Moika.
Okay, sorry, Dominic. I would say that typically in Slovenia, young researchers publish in agreement with their mentors. So the first thing is to change the mentors' mentality or make them more aware of open access or more adaptive. In Slovenia, we are quite lucky. There is an association of young researchers, Young Academy of Slovenia, and they support open science very much. They're a member of Eurodoc and other European organizations, also collaborating in proposals to Horizon Europe call on changing the research assessment. So yeah, as you said, there is contradiction that they really support open access, open science, but the system, the schema of research assessment is still like the traditional one. But it seems that this will slowly change. On 26th, I think, or 22nd of October, the Slovenian Rectors Conference is having an event, online event on changing the research assessment. So even the universities themselves know that they will have to do this sooner or later.
Okay, thanks. Dominic?
Yeah, so I think I'd agree with what Moika said. We also see that early career researchers, certainly sort of, people much younger than myself, are engaging with open science generally far more, and I see more energy there and more interest there. And I've really noticed that in the last couple of years that actually, I mean, we found organizations of students who are interested in open science springing up in the university without us having anything to do with them. You know, that this is happening organically, and that's really, really good. And what I would say is that if your policy, so I agree that people will still publish where their mentors want them to, or in agreement with their supervisors. I think that if you have the right policy and something like this, so the approach that we're trying to take is that people can still publish in their journal of choice. Actually, you know, it's a rights retention policy, but you should still be able to submit your manuscript anywhere.
Okay, Dominique, you have a question from Françoise. What were the reactions of the researchers when discussing the new policy, and how have you overcome their fears to have their submissions rejected by the publishers?
So that was an objection that came up quite a lot. I think the thing is, well, we're not the first in the world to do this. So we've looked at, I mentioned Harvard a couple of times, and they don't turn away Harvard publications. When people from Harvard submit things to journals, they don't really turn them away. And I suppose, I mean, we're not quite Harvard, but as a relatively prestigious university with a decent research reputation, we're trying to take the same kind of approach. You know, your research is good and you should have confidence in this and people will want to publish it. But also, Plan S is coming and you will have to do this anyway. So, you know, the publishers will have to change. Then they're not going to be able to just turn things away because of a Plan S policy. That would be a huge risk for them to do that. And then as the third thing, if people are really anxious, then there is there's a release valve, there is a get out clause. We have an opt out mechanism, so we can do that. So I think it's going to be about making people feel supported. Now we're only at the point of starting to implement now. So ask me this question again in 5 months' time, and I might have a different answer. But I think it's about making sure that people, being honest with people, making them realize. I think authors don't realize what a position of power they're in most of the time. You know, they've written the stuff. We write it, we peer review it, we do everything. You know, so we think it's unlikely, but it is a bit of a gamble.
Okay, thanks. There's a question from Elena Diomidi. How the impact factor affected by Plan S initiatives? Is this factor the most important criterion for any researcher in order to publish in open access without any cost, either individually or institutionally? What's your opinion about this impact factor and the Plan S initiative? This can change the situation right now. This can alter the impact factor and how this is considered or how this is calculated, or the future of impact factor if everybody starts publishing in open access in other different journals. What do you think? Monica, Dominique?
Monica? Taking priority over Dominique all the time. I'm sorry. Ladies are always talking too much. Yeah, I think that it's not that publishing in predominantly open access way will change the calculation of impact factor. It's more that research, that changes of research assessment are going on everywhere. I was really very pleasantly surprised when seeing the Horizon Europe proposal for the template for the first time, because of course I was aware of what open science requirements will be in Horizon Europe. But the important thing is that in this proposal template, the self-assessment or the statement of previous scientific achievements is already change of research assessment. So each partner in the consortium preparing this proposal can list up to 5 publications, but they have to be open access publications already. They can list up to 5 research data sets, but they have to be already fair. data sets, they can list research software and so on. So this is already practical implementation of changed research assessment. And I'm aware that in the European research area, which means the European Commission and your member states, there are many activities regarding changing. So this will change, and in the sense that other research results will be acknowledged as important, not only publications. Anywhere, there are too many publications around the world now and nobody can read this anymore. So I don't know, it's just like a housewife approach.
Okay, I think from my point of view, I think impact factors are a flawed metric anyway. You know, they're not. I mean, I'm not a scientist, and I can tell that this is not a fair way of calculating things. So I think that they're problematic anyway. I think it's worth remembering that they serve publishers. You know, an impact factor is there. It's a means of trying to differentiate one journal from another to attract more submissions. You know, I don't think readers really think about impact factors when they're reading. I think authors think about impact factors when they're submitting. Where will my article be read most? So it's a metric which really serves publishers rather than scientists. If things are open, then things will be accessible anyway. I think the way that people read is changing as well. You know, now we've moved away from paper. It's not like, you know, in the day when people were reading print journals and they could only read so many, or they were having print delivered to labs and things. But I think the world's different now. It will be interesting to see how things change. I know that some some quite new journals, some exclusively open access journals have got very high impact factors very, very quickly. So I think there's disruption there, definitely.
Okay, thank you. I think there are no more questions. Please feel free to ask anything you want. Let me ask you something. Both Moika and Johan have stressed that the diamond route is one of the best alternatives, and this is something that libraries and universities can, of course, support. But do you really think that this could help change the situation? Or maybe the transformative agreements from the publishers is like a counter action against anything we've been doing from the universities and libraries with regards to open access. So because any journal in a diamond journal that we can start publishing today, it will take maybe 5, 7, 6, 10 years to become a consolidated journal. So what do you think about that?
I believe that all possible changes are needed. This means that we have to change subscription spend into open access spend. If we are publishing journals, my university publishes 49 journals, we have to transform them into diamond. Of course, such university published journals or society journals, they represent a smaller percentage of total journals around the world, but this is added. So if we make changes or we transform from subscription to diamond in all of these sectors, then somehow we will reach this turning point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd agree with that entirely. We similarly we have a portfolio of diamond journals that we host in the library. I think we have about 20 now. So we're a small operation using OJS. We're not a publisher. It's a technical service to host journals. That the publishing activity is undertaken by people in the faculties that understand understand the subjects. We don't run peer review. We don't do marketing. So it's important, but it is small. I think transformative deals in green open access and policy change are going to be the big ways of dealing with a whole-scale transition to open access. But Diamond is important, and I think it's a worthwhile investment. And I would agree with the point that Monica made before about it being something that libraries should be spending on and investing in.
Okay, another question about the Plan S and this condition of publishing in open access, but with CC BY license. Did you think this is, and maybe this is a provocative question, this is too much to require to the researchers? Because, well, I can speak from my experience. Whenever you speak about Creative Commons licenses, and people see things like releasing the content for free on the web, and even if this is done by commercial publishers, of course, they always think that they are losing control of their publications. They think everybody is going to copy their work, instead of thinking that these licenses are actually protecting them. Because they can always demonstrate that they published with specific conditions to reuse the content. So going back, it's too much. Maybe other Creative Commons licenses should have been considered, like non-derivative or share alike. What do you think about that?
I can probably speak to that one. So yeah, I mean, in the UKRI, in our sort of national interpretation of Plan S, then alternative CC licenses are allowed. So there are some circumstances where you can have an NCND, but they are the exception and not the rule. I think that's the thing, that there has to be a justification for having something that's not CC BY. In terms of whether it's too much, I mean, it's happened, hasn't it? Really, you know, it's a bit late to be asking the question, because it's sort of here with us. But yeah, I think similarly, we don't shout about it, but in our local interpretation, then we have capacity to be able to tone it down where there is a good reason.
I mean, non-commercial, non-derivative serves sort of protecting against commercial misuse of content of research articles, if this can happen at all, and against using parts of articles to compile any publication. But there is research ethics, or generally ethics of using such results. So I agree with you that authors might feel too naked if there is no NCND, but in a way, people or companies using research results, they have to be ethical in such uses. And anything that is published as an article is meant for the public. Anyway, so if there is something that could really be heavily misused, it shouldn't be published. Research is mostly done with public funding, and I think that it's also meant that companies can use knowledge created with public funding. So this is okay. Yeah, but it's definitely, I have noticed, since I am the contact person for some transformational agreements, I have noticed that if there is a choice between CC BY and CC BY NCND, many authors choose this like more restrictive license. Yeah, you're right, Raul. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, Dominique was mentioning in the chat that the public includes businesses. Of course, you are totally right. You are totally right. Well, that's it. I think we can move to the fourth session on open access and copyright issues. And it's like we were linking the Plan S roundtable to that new topic. So Tatiana, Eleni, are you there to start? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be the chair of this last session on open access and copyright issues. Always copyright law and open access is a fascinating topic with a lot of discussions about the controversy or the possibility of a workable symbiosis between copyright law and open access. In this panel, we have also speakers with their expertise will enlighten some of the questions regarding this thorny relationship between copyright law and open access. Of course, the discussion is linked with what has been discussed right now, because all these issues regarding the license, regarding the new models of open access are also strongly connected to copyright issues. I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, is Dr. Prodromos Tsiavos, who is a legal counsel at OpenAIRE and Athena Research Center, and the head of the digital and innovation at the Onassis Group, as well as the director of Intellectual Property Rights and Innovation Institute at the European Public Law Organization. Dr. Prodromos Tsiavos is known about his work on copyright law and open access issues. And today, the topic of his presentation will be copyright obstacles to open access and how to deal with it. Prodromos, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I'm really glad to be here, albeit through the teleconference. Let me try to share my presentation. 1 second. All right. Can you see it now? Yes. So what I want to share with you today is, first of all, many thanks for hosting us here. And I think this is a very exciting moment in the life of open science. And I want to speak about copyright obstacles, but mostly I want us to share the situation where we are in terms of open science and which are the obstacles and the opportunities and how they relate to copyright law. And I think this is the interesting part. Now, these are 6+1 moments of openness, which I want to share with you. I will start with what we have done as a community, which is right. What have we done correctly? I mean, openness is with us for now almost 4 decades. So there are things which we know they are working well. And it's important to take a minute and think about them. And the first thing would be the free open source software licenses. Starting in the 1980s with Richard Stallman, the GPL is still valid in its 3rd version and has multiple variations, including licenses for services or data. And still one of the most successful examples of interventions that actually led to a result of opening up code primarily. And what we have seen almost 20 years ago, almost 15, 18 years ago with Creative Commons licenses is how we actually do the transposition from opening up code to opening up contents, whether this content is data or other resources. And this is a very important moment because Creative Commons, what they initiated was the really widespread of openness beyond the communities developing code. And this has been important both legally, because the process of developing these licenses, which was a very international and collective one, led to a lot of scholarship in relation to openness. So it laid the foundations for the open science as we know it now. So open science started from a different trajectory having to do with the open access to the journals, and Creative Commons was more this transposition from software to content. Eventually, Creative Commons, what it did, it actually became the dominant model of licensing for content, particularly scientific content, particular data. At the same time, if open source software licenses and Creative Commons started from grassroots, from the let's say bottom up, we had an emergence of another very important phenomenon, which was the open science policies. And this is really an important moment because this is the area in which we were able to see institutional change and institutional interventions that had to do with openness, and not just grassroots communities. And in that sense, we had initially the oldest, let's say, legislation in this sector is the public sector information legislation with the PSI directives that actually eventually became the open data legislation and policies. Similarly, the Europeana, as it has evolved, it has been a tremendously important force in the area of culture, although it has changed substantially since its introduction. And what we've seen increasingly the movement from open access to open science. And of course, the latest version of the impact that these kinds of policy and legal interventions had, we even see it in the copyright limitations and exceptions, at least in the European legislation, which still are not what we wanted them to do. Still, the text and data mining exception, for instance, is not what we wanted it to be, but it's a substantial progress compared to the discussions we had about 20 years ago. And finally, something which we tend to forget is that millions of euros have been spent to support open science, at least in the EU and the United States, also in other countries and jurisdictions, but I take this one as playing a very important role in how you have this movement. So what we take in these first moments of openness is how we actually started grassroots. We started with the individual copyright owner releasing her own work. And increasingly, we had a series of legislative, policy, and institutional transformations that actually led to the production of an open ecosystem. Which brings me to the second, following this movement, micro and large, let's try to take another view of the SAFE movement and see where we stand. So if we go and actually check the micro-texture of openness, we will see the emergence of what I call techno licenses. And I think this is something which we tend to forget, or we tend to see it in the background, and we do not give it as much attention as we should. But in the past 15 years, we have seen the emergence of multiple technical tools that allow us to navigate the complexity of the licenses. I'll just bring here as examples 4 examples, which I think they're quite relevant for our discussion. Back in around 2010, 2009, I think 2007 it started, and it moved up to 2012. We had the public domain calculators, or the different types of tools which allowed us through decision trees to understand which works were public domain and which not. And this was a very important tool because it made us to actually investigate legally an area of law which tended to be under-researched, which was that of what is not copyrighted. But it also produced tools that could give us very practical, concrete answers in relation to, can I use that? Because I think there are no rights on it. So it's the ultimate openness. The second thing, which again, we take it for granted, is the 3 layers of Creative Commons licenses. So the lawyer readable, the human readable, and the technology readable. And the reason, and technology readable is not something fancy, it's just a fixed URI where you can find the licenses. And we've seen also a lot of other stuff in this area, like legal markup languages, rights markup languages like ODRML or MPEG 21 languages, which allowed essentially the licenses to be expressed in ways in which they made them searchable. And of course, we have other development in this area, some of them being quite fancy, like blockchain contracts, etc. But I think this is an important element, that we had a tool explicitly, extremely easy for someone to be able to track the licenses and reduce license complexity immensely with that. The third part has been licenses which allow the compatibility. So how do we check compatibility of licenses? And this started with a discussion between GPL 3.0 and CC 4.0. And especially the licenses that had the copyleft element. And here the question was, how can we tell whether the licenses are truly compatible? Again, we've seen some legal literature here, but also practical tools, also in specific communities like science communities, like the machine learning communities, which needed corpora of linguistic data, which they could process, that came from multiple sources, or the open data community. But again, you had a technical tool which was developed by the community and allowed the resolution of conflicts between licenses. And a project in which I'm taking part as well, NIFOS, is also doing the same work, trying to bring together all these tools. So this second moment is a moment when we use technology in order to navigate the obstacles of transaction costs that we find in the licenses. Because I want to remind to everyone that one of the primary reasons why the Creative Commons licenses were introduced was to reduce transaction costs in the reuse of content. We tend to forget that. We think just of the openness, but transaction cost reduction was a major thing. And this was one of the key moments, even in the economic model that Yochai Benkler in the turn of the century had described in some of his very early papers. Now, going to the third moment is the macro structures, which I think are equally important. And here, my subtitle is From Networks to Organizations. And what we've seen in the past 20 years is how we had a series of networks, initially, of organizations through European funding. This is a Eurocentric example that gradually turned into organizations, with the latest and most important example being the European Open Science Cloud, but also OpenAIRE, XEAN, DGI, EUDAT, and Europeana. In all these cases, we started as networks or as parallel structures between networks and legal entities, but eventually we had new legal entities, and that meant also new institutions that were devoted to supporting openness. And that's a profoundly important moment. We speak a lot about licenses and we think openness is just about licenses, but it's impossible to open stuff in an open science environment if you don't have the technical equipment, from compatibility tools to Zenodo as an open source repository, and of course to have the organizations and the constellations of organizations that are able to support that. Now, this is a new form of an institution. As we had the copyright offices 30 or 40 years ago, now we have different forms of institutions supporting openness, and it's a very different animal. And this is important because it produces a lot of supplementary material, not just contracts. Now, what is the talk of the town now? I mean, these are developments happening, but they have a kind of genealogy that gets us 2 to 4 decades back. So now the discussion is about open artificial intelligence. And the reason why I've brought that forward is I think this is a big challenge for the open science community. And I'm working a lot on this subject with a number of colleagues around the world. And what we see there is that it's not that straightforward. What does it mean to open artificial intelligence? And we know that this is technically feasible or legally feasible, because I take an example which seems to be misplaced, but is not. The General Data Protection Regulation contains one provision in Article 13 explaining that if you have an automated decision that involves your personal data and it's being done algorithmically, you have the capacity to request to have access to the algorithm and understand how the decision has been made for you. And in a world in which we have a lot of artificial intelligence, we need to think how we open it up. And it could be that we break it down into its components, like the data sets that was used to train the algorithm steps, or the algorithm as such, and its architecture, and the actual application. But it's a real question, how do you make this applicable? If licenses was the thing like 20 years ago and still is, what is the thing that is going to make the open artificial intelligence truly open? The European Data Act and the European Services Act may provide us an insight into that. And I think they come as descendants essentially of the GDPR in that respect. So they're trying to figure out measures to tackle openness in the artificial intelligence sector, but we still need to find what that is. And I have an idea about this one, and I'll talk about it in the final slides, in the 6th part. So this whole discussion about opening AI brought about the question, which was always there, of how ethical it is to open, how unethical it is to open. And I think I have here 2 extremes. The first one is what it means to see opening as an ethical practice, because sometimes opening is not something that you are obliged to do, but is something which needs to be, in a sense, either weaved into our decision-making institutional fabric as something which is ethical to do. And indeed, healthcare research, to the extent that protects personal sensitive data, it should be open. Similarly, education, cultural heritage, whatever it is paid by public money, and things that have to do with equity, inclusion, diversity. And so openness is not just something which we see in the science as a good practice, which allows us to have replicable and testable research, but also something which is an ethical approach. And that's why we see that as part of European initiatives like the RRI, the Responsible Research and Innovation, which again, among the other ethical principles, you have openness. On the other hand, we cannot ignore anymore the fact that we have to be careful with open content. So content produced by and depicting children and young people, it has to be very well thought of how it is being open. Personal data, we spoke about it, and also sensitive personal testimony and social activism. So there are measures here as to how you could mitigate possible risks there. But what I want to pose here, without diminishing in any fashion the importance of openness, is how we can actually make this happening in an open fashion, but at the same time make sure how that we respect and we take into consideration all these elements. And what is crucial, absolutely crucial here, is that we do that not through licensing, not through a copyright instrument, but through the other institutional instruments that I mentioned before. That's why institutions like EOSC or OpenAIRE are so crucial, because they produce guidelines, they produce procedures, they produce other types of policies which can complement open licensing. There is no point discussing openness just in terms of copyright openness, because this is something which actually is not going to solve the issues we have. Now, the biggest, however, I think, silver bullet we have right now is what I call the by design turn. And we've seen this is something that started mostly in Canada with privacy by design. And we have it in GDPR, where it asks people to take measures, organizational, technical, and legal, which means techno regulation should be at the stage of the design there. We've talked about open by design, and we talk about ethics by design. So it means that we should change the way in which not just use technology, but design technology, and have that as a conscious process. Now, if we see that as something coming only from the private sector, then it's quite difficult to do it, because it's a market which is going to drive it. But we have so much technology and innovation coming from public institutions or publicly funded institutions. And in that sense, we should look as to how we do that. World Bank, with the Ethics by Design paper, gives us an indication of how this can be done, but we have other approaches, and we should learn from the personal data sector as to how this is done. So where are we now? What are the final conclusions? Opening AI, there is no transportation, as Bruno Latour says, without transformation. We can do it, but it has a cost and it has implications. It's not just bringing a license and sticking it on material. We need to keep developing techno-licensing tools. We need to think of ethical issues not just through legal licenses and copyright licenses, but mostly through organizational structures. And finally, open is more complicated today than it used to be 20 years ago, but is also more needed today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prodromos, for this insightful presentation under an alternative approach, seeing copyright law by distance, and focusing also on the future of this debate between copyright law and open access. I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Françoise Van Doorn, who is the Research Support Coordinator of the Université Libre de Bruxelles, for her own presentation, which is also on another very interesting topic, the open access provision in copyright law, examples from Germany, the Netherlands, France, and Belgium. Françoise, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Paramètres d'affichage, Françoise. Paramètres d'affichage.
Yes, sorry.
Paramètres.
Need to move this. Okay.
Dupliquer les, voilà.
Yes.
Okay. In this presentation, we will look into provisions supporting open access to publications, which have been introduced in the copyright laws of 4 countries: Germany, the Netherlands, France, and Belgium. Part of this presentation is drawn from the work of Laura Depot, and who addressed these copyright issues in her master thesis, and which she successfully defended in September at the University of Brussels. I will not make a legal analysis of the different laws since I'm not a lawyer, and the objective of this presentation is to draw attention to this legal instrument to address copyright issues related to open access, to discuss the possible impact, limitations, and perspectives. Okay. So the objective of the provisions that are introduced in the copyright law is for authors to retain the right to provide public access to research results when research has been funded by public funds. So it can be globally formulated as such. The author of a short scientific work based on research activity publicly funded is entitled to make the work publicly available following a certain period of time after the work was first published. So this is a right, this is not an obligation, it is not an open access mandate. The author retains this right even if copyright has been transferred to the publisher. And there are some conditions that have to be met, and these vary according to the national legislations in these different countries in terms of the type of work and the frequency of the journal issue, the version that can be shared, the embargo period that has to be respected, and the proportion of required public funding of the research activity. So here is a table that provides a summary of these differences. So regarding the type of work, the legislations provide for articles to be shared publicly, sorry, except in the Netherlands where they talk about short scientific works. The version that can be shared is the author accepted manuscript, except in the Netherlands where the version of record can be shared. The frequency of the periodical issue, well, the article has been published must be twice a year in Germany, but only one issue a year in the other countries. The embargo period is 12 months in Germany. It is stated as being a reasonable period of time in the Netherlands, and in France and Belgium, it's 6 months in science, technology, and medicines, and 12 months in social sciences and the humanities. And regarding the research activity on which the publication is based, it must be funded at least half by public funds in Germany, France, and Belgium, but there is no minimum required for the Netherlands. It can be partially or completely funded by public funds. So these are the common and the differences across the countries regarding these provisions. So there are other issues that are raised, such as, for example, has the law a retroactive effect? And it is clearly stated in the law in Belgium, but it's not clearly stated in the other laws, so that's still not really clear. Which license can be used for the shared version? In France, they consider that a CC BY non-commercial license can be used, but it's not indicated in the other laws. And then there's the question whether the national copyright legislation of the author override the publisher's contractual provisions when they are referring to a law from another country. And so this is really a question of international law that I will not address. There are experts in international law that are looking into this issue. So now let's have a look at the impact of such copyright provisions. In the Netherlands, the Dutch universities participated in a pilot called You Share, We Take Care. And it was intended to test how the copyright provisions could be implemented to enhance self-archiving by the researchers. So it was led and supported by the Association of Dutch Universities, and the pilot took place from February 2019 to August 2019. as we have seen before, the provision is quite vague in the Netherlands, and so the universities define the implementation guidelines on the basis of legal advice. And so they decided that there would be a 6-month embargo period for all the articles, and that the version of record would be shared, would be made available, and it would be in the institutional repository of the researcher, and libraries would help researchers doing that. And so as a result of this pilot, 600 researchers from 13 universities participated, and more than 2,800 publications were deposited in open access in these institutional repositories during the pilot. So now let's have a closer look at 2 universities. The University of Utrecht. So this university continued their support to depositing short works in open access in the repository beyond the end of the pilot. And they accepted all short works, even those published before 2018. And so you can see on the graph the increase of publications available on open access in the institutional repository and the effect of the retrospective application of the provision during this service provided by the university. 1,000 works were uploaded during the pilot phase, and the others were deposited after the end of the pilot. So this support service to researchers involved the entire repository staff at the University of Utrecht. Now, another example is the University of Leiden. There, only one person was in charge of uploading short works in the repository. And so they focused on publications from the current and the previous year of publication. And they could not support researchers for depositing the works published before 2018. So there you can see on the graph the increase of publications available on open access in the institutional repository as from 2018 as compared to previous years before the pilot was launched. So what were the reactions of the researchers and of the publishers regarding this pilot? Well, the researchers participating who accepted to participate to the pilot, they were really enthusiastic, and they wanted to share both their recent publications and older material. But some other researchers were reluctant to participate, and the reasons were that there was uncertainty regarding the reactions of publishers and the reactions of their co-authors. And there was also this feeling of uncertainty with regard to their position, for example, as journal editor, if they deviated from the publisher's policy. So there was clearly a fear of backlash from the publishers. The reaction of the publishers regarding this pilot, they were critical of the use of the version of record that could be shared, and also regarding the addition of book chapters from edited books, not from monographs, that could also be shared. However, there was no evidence about the impact of implementing these principles on the publishing business. And a few publishers have threatened individual researchers with takedown notice, and this was dealt by the universities who supported the researchers, and they pointed to the author's rights that was anchored in the Dutch Copyright Act. And so in some cases, it led to new transformative deals with smaller society publishers. So now in Belgium, we have not set up such an operation to raise awareness and to invite researchers to exercise this right. There was a small survey in the French-speaking part of Belgium made by Laura Depeau in the framework of her master thesis. And there were questions related to copyright and open access. And it turns out that 8% think they will lose their copyright when publishing in open access, and 30% of the respondents think they are protected and they may make their article publicly available after a certain period, whatever the contract signed with the publisher. However, there was only one respondent who really knew about the article of law that permitted this sharing of the publication. So there is clearly a lack of awareness of their rights among the researchers. So what conclusions can we draw? Well, really, we need to raise awareness of the authors. As we have seen, they really exercise these rights once they know about it, but they also need support, guidance, and they need to be reassured regarding the rights of their co-authors and also regarding the publisher's reaction. But there are some limitations also regarding these copyright provisions with respect to Plan S, because as we have seen, these provisions do not comply, in fact, with Plan S, since they all involve an embargo period. And also regarding the open license, since it is not clear whether an open license can be used, and most of the time it is restricted to non-commercial use of the version that is shared. Regarding the version that can be used also, it can be problematic because most provisions concern the author accepted manuscript and not the version of record. And we know that for researchers to get hold of this manuscript may be sometimes very difficult. And if the version of record could be used, these provisions would be much more efficient. And also, we don't know what would be the reactions of the publishers if such copyright provisions were generalized. Regarding the perspectives, there is the Liber Association has launched a zero embargo campaign, and they have drafted a law for the use of publicly funded scholarly publications. Can be inspiring for other countries or even for the European Union. And we have heard yesterday from Silvia Bottaro from the European Commission that they were going to analyze the author's rights to enable sharing of publicly funded peer-reviewed articles without restriction. So typically these kind of copyright provisions would be examined by the European Commission within the framework of this analysis. So I am finished, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Françoise, for this comprehensive overview of all these new and not so new legislative measures regarding how to improve open access. And also it was very interesting to see the impact and the implications also regarding their practical applications, how the authors have seen these measures, and it is also really promising that now we have something on the table to discuss also at the level of the European Commission, of the European Union, that all these initiatives will serve as a model. I would like now to give the floor to the last speaker of this session, to Christina Lenz, who is the managing editor of the Stockholm University Press. And Christina will deal in her presentation on another also very interesting topic, how to educate researchers about copyright clearance and licensing for open access publishing. Christina, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Well, here goes my presentation. A tricky challenge educating researchers about copyright clearance and licensing for open access publishing. Well, first, I'm going to say something that most of you already have said. Let's see, I can't change my slides. Now, about why it is such a tricky challenge. In the sum of yesterday, Andreas Stegvis already mentioned this, and so did Wilhelm. It's about to change cultural practices, and it's really going slowly. And a lot of scientists are still quite conservative. And they say, I support open access, but I want to publish with a high-ranking publisher. And we all know what that means. So how do we educate researchers at Stockholm University Library? Stockholm University Press is part of the Stockholm University Library, I should mention. So we have dissertation support, and we have research, data management, and publishing support, and APC open access publishing support. So these are the transformative agreements which are paid by the library. And then we have general publishing support, and then there is Stockholm University Press. And I work mainly with Stockholm University Press, but also with the general publishing support for, well, it could be students or researchers. So how can we help? Well, there is a lot about copyright. So when they email us and ask about, I'm about to sign an agreement with the publisher, we need to explain that they can lose half of their copyright to the publisher, and they need to know that they, of course, they decide where to publish, but it's how their text is to be used, they must decide. And sometimes they also say, oh, but maybe I lose my copyright as well when I publish open access. Well, this doesn't have to be the case. So there are a lot of, still a lot of ignorance, I would say, which we can see when researchers come with their questions. But it's a kind of bottom up when we do this to help them and to choose the right license and explaining to them the consequences they might meet if they don't have the correct license and permissions. And the permission always needs to be written. We have templates, agreements, especially at Stockholm University Press as a publisher. We have co-author agreements that could be signed between the editor of the edited volume, for example, because then the editors sign agreement with us as a publisher. So, but I'm going to give you some examples also later on. So, Stockholm University Press, we have now actually published 40 books. We started with our first book in 2015. And the copyright always stays with the author, and we publish with the CC BY license. There are very few books that has a more restrictive license. But then, as we all know, there are exceptional cases with figures, images, and so forth. So here it goes. What's happened here? I named this illustration of scientific reasoning because it's like this. The Swedish copyright law provides special permission in these cases, making it possible to publish images without asking the copyright owner's permission and without risk for liability. In this case, the artist, the photographer, and the one in the image is the artist, is Orland. So the co-author of this chapter tried to ask for permission, but here we also see a problem with the forms. When you ask for permission, you have to add how many copies of the book is published and so forth. So at that time, this was published in 2017, I think it was. We have had a legal advisor at the library, which was wonderful, because since we were starting up the press, it was great to have a legal advisor. And he said to us, well, he also tried to contact Orland or the bureau of her. And he said, let's put the strictest license and put it as an illustration of scientific reasoning. And Orland has not been in contact with us yet or claimed anything. but this of course could be sorted if so. Next example, I took an image of this. Well, what happened here? Captions are missing. Okay, so I, as a managing editor, and also the editors of this edited volume thought that, and it's actually correct, that the images, the figures are from the author of this chapter, and that they are explained in the body text. So fine, we thought. However, when the author saw this, said, "Oh no, I had a list of illustration which I sent to you, the authors and the editors, and they should of course have sent it to me as managing editor." So here you can see working routines, how important it is. And also when the proofs were sent, in the beginning, we said it's up to the editors to decide, because many times the editors say, no, they have seen the final versions, they've sent it, they shouldn't change anything, we check it. Okay, but nowadays it's mandatory that each author of every chapter needs to have a look and confirm that the proofs of their chapters are correct. So this is, so what responsibility do we have as a publisher? Well, in this case, of course, we had to republish the book with the correct caption for this figure. And as you can see, it's all rights reserved. And what does that mean? Well, it means that another researcher can't use this particular figure or any in this chapter, actually, since, yeah, because it's closed. So next example. Here you can see copyright claims are welcomed. So this is also an edited volume. And this is a nice way of doing it. The author of this chapter had really tried to reach the rights holder, but it was not successful. So instead, we did it like this, with the most restrictive license, the NCND. So, and if you, I have links at the end of my presentations with the DOIs to each book and references to each, so you can check and look for yourself if you're interested and come back with questions. So how can we UNICA members cooperate? Well, we are here to discuss this, which is wonderful, and also to collaborate with EOSC, like what Wilhelm is doing, and to show what we are actually doing together. With a lot of you have talked about policies and how we can collaborate, and it's not, I agree, it's not a library question. It needs to be bottom up, but we can definitely help, especially at university libraries. So to sum up, it is definitely a tricky challenge to educate researchers in all these matters that about open access publishing and open science as a whole. And it's a lot of learning by doing, we all know that. And the university libraries are hubs of open access expertise. Everyone has said this today and yesterday, and there is a great value, I think, and we all think, for the UNICA community to share this among us. So thank you so much, and later on you can have a look at the links.
Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you very much, Christina. It was wonderful. We have seen also this example, so now we can understand better how difficult is your work and how difficult it is really to educate and to explain regarding these issues. With this presentation, the presentation part of this session has been completed, but of course we have the discussion part, which is, in my opinion, maybe one of the most important. So I would like to see if we have any questions in the chat. We have seen 3 complementary presentations. We have attended 3 different approaches regarding the relationship between copyright law, licensing, and also the goal of open access. And now the floor is to the public for the questions or the comments regarding these presentations. For the moment, I cannot see in the chat any questions, but maybe they will follow. I have some questions, and I have some questions for the 3 presentations. I will start with a question and comment and question regarding the first presentation of Prodromos. I agree with you, Prodromos, that really technology and also ethics, and here we are discussing in a kind of soft law which will be integrated in the code, because you have made reference to the privacy by design approach of the GDPR. So maybe, as I have understood, we can follow this road regarding the copyright law issues and the open access dilemma. My question is the following. You are in favor of a technical approach, an ethical approach, and as I have understood, maybe if it's not correct, please correct me, you consider that the law shall be behind, that all these questions regarding licensing, regarding copyright law are somehow past or an evolving present, but not the future of how to deal with this question, the difficult question between open access and copyright law. However, copyright law is there. Copyright law is law, it is compulsory, and ethical also guidelines are often, let's say, created by entities, technological entities, or the practice, and in that sense, they are tested in the society and then they become law. So how do you see all this evolution and the relationship between the future of the regulation of open access and property or autonomy issues, because the question of copyright law is also a question of autonomy of the authors. And how do you see this evolution by having into account also law as a factor in this equation? So copyright law does not have a future, copyright laws shall change, or in any way all this, it will be superseded by technology and ethical guidelines. What is your view regarding this kind of relationship? Copyright law has no future? Prodromos? I'm not sure if he's listening or...
It seems he's not in the call anymore.
He's not in the call anymore?
I cannot see him
yet. Yeah.
Because I did not receive any notification that he was leaving and he was the first speaker. But I think that the question also, because we have, it can be answered also by all the other speakers. We have seen the Prodromos approach, and he puts emphasis more on technology and on by design approaches. Do you also think that this is the future, or do you believe that copyright law still has a role to play? Because this is the session about copyright law and open access. I don't know if anyone would like to, the speakers, or Francoise, you have been discussing about these legal changes, and also it has been very promising that we have these legislative initiatives. At the same time, you have said that the these initiatives are not up to date with the Plan S. So maybe we need to modify them. Maybe finally the technical approach will precede the legal one, since law is often outdated, or do we still need this initiative at the European level?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so it's difficult for me to say anything about that. I can just say that copyright law has been there for quite a long time, so it's probably going to stay there for still a long time. What is promising is that indeed some provisions can be included in favor of open access. Probably they should be more ambitious to be compliant with what we want to do with scientific works. I think it is possible. The discussion must be on the national levels with all the stakeholders. And well, I can talk about Belgium because we don't have large publishers. Only in law we have some publishers, and they mainly publish books. So they were not so much concerned by this copyright provision. So there has not been a lot of, how can I say, they were not against it. But I guess in other countries it can be much more problematic. Maybe something from at the European level can help to have these kind of provisions being included in the national laws, indeed.
And also here we have the lobbying question, of course, because for these provisions to be really established at the European level, we need also to take into consideration a lot of factors. But we have a question from Christina, from the public. Educating researchers and teachers on how to best use resources subject to copyright is definitely a great service to be offered from libraries. But what extent can we put on our shoulders such a responsibility when we are not legal advisors? In fact, the question, as I understand in a nutshell, is that we're expecting from librarians to act as lawyers, and how difficult is this in practice to happen. Christina, yes. Can we have your view on this? Is it so tricky, so difficult?
Thank you so much. As I mentioned, we did have a legal advisor, a lawyer, at the library for a few years. We don't have it at the moment. So that was wonderful. Like I said, I could always ask him, how should we do this? And we have this question coming up from a researcher. What advice should I tell them? But you're absolutely right. When it comes to my profession as a managing editor, I learned so much from this person. So of course, it's still very, very, very tricky. But now I'm more confident when I sort of educate researchers, and when they come with questions and what they need to think about. And you can always send. There are so much information and links and that we can give them as well. But you're absolutely right. We are no lawyers, legal advisors. We can just help them by giving them instructions. And I also think what Prodemos said about ethical open is so important, because it's really about doing things ethical as well.
Thank you for this answer. I have also another question regarding your presentation. This was, it is connected to how difficult it is to educate and act in specific circumstances. I was really very much interested from your example 3, when in fact you, the author, or you have made all the necessary efforts in order to find the author, and finally you did not find the person or the publisher, and in that case you take the risk that you publish and the complaint can come later. This is really, let's say, a risky approach. At the same time, from a classic copyright law view, at the same time, I can imagine that in these cases, in practice, you did not have any follow-up, or did you have? Where these complaints came later or not? This author claims came later or not? Or in that case, is it just a case where the author is not there, is not interested? How does it work in practice, this kind of approach?
That's a very, very good question. Well, there's not been any claims. I'm in very close contact with the editor of this volume and some of the authors. You say it's risky. Well, we thought it was a nice way of doing it. And also it could have been an example of the first to illustrate scientific reasoning. We could also say, but it was, yeah, I took this example just because I think it's a good way of doing it. And then if they do contact, we can sort this out, hopefully. The most problematic would be if we would have to retract the image or the whole chapter, let's say. But it's also an ethical dilemma, I think. Sorry, did I answer to the question or did I miss something?
No, this was the question.
Okay.
Yes, this was the question, and I agree that it is also an ethical dilemma. And this is why I found this example and this practice also really fascinating, because really you make a balance here. And here we can say that this balance also is a kind of a legal kind of reasoning, because you see the pros and cons, and finally you go for open access, but saying in a nice way that the copyright law claim can follow. So I found this fascinating. Here we have also some information from Elena Diomidi Parpouna that Prodromos has not access due to network and electricity connection problems. It's a pity because we know that it's heavily raining in Athens. So this is the reason why he's not able to discuss with us this his presentation. Do you have any other questions from the public for the speakers? Some other questions?
If I may, I have a comment to add to what Christina has just said.
Yes.
And I think that what we have learned with open access, for example, and is that in fact, copyright, you always have to weight the risks and the advantages, and it's a balance. And if you always respect the law, you don't go ahead anymore. You just don't move, because copyright law is so slow to change. So it's also just put in the balance what are the advantages, what are the risks, and then you can see where you can go. And probably that's what you did, Christina, with this book and with this picture, is that, okay, what is the risk, and is it so important that I cannot publish the picture? Well, that's a way to go ahead with these copyright issues.
Christina?
Yes, I would like to also have help from Wilhelm, because we could tell you about, I don't remember which year it was, 2014, 15 perhaps, when we started at the library to publish doctoral thesis, open access. And there was one researcher who said, oh, I haven't agreed to this. And it was, even an article in one of our daily biggest newspaper about this. And it was quite an interesting discussion about the availability of doctoral theses, the researchers, and etc. Would you like to comment on this, Wilhelm, perhaps?
Well, we digitized old theses, so we made them available from the beginning of the night. So it was about 3,000 books we made available, and we had it available for 2 or 3 years. And we thought this was for the common good. We couldn't ask all of the people from Stockholm University that have made the thesis. Then there came one complaint, and of course we took them down, all of the theses, and it was a really big and great discussion in Sweden about this and about open access. We did never have to pay anything for it. It never went to trial. And now we have opened up everything again, but we have an agreement with the copyright owners to have it open, and we pay a little bit to the copyright owners organization to have all the theses open. So now we do it legally, but we didn't from the beginning, but it was to try the system.
Yes, this is very interesting, and this also puts to the table another issue, because you have discussed about ownership. And the hot question is in many institutions, and I have seen this question also in the session before, who is the owner of all this work that is created in the university? Shall the author be the owner, or shall the university, because we have here an employment contract? At the same time, academics have academic freedom, so they are not the classic employees. Students also are not employees of the university. So here also it's another tricky question regarding from who we need to have this authorization. And this, in my opinion, needs to be clarified. I don't know if you have similar clarification in your institution, or is it clear in all cases? Also, this is a question for all of you.
In Sweden, if you write the thesis at the university or all your articles and everything, it is the copyright of the author. So it's not legislation, but it's called the lärarundantaget. So everything you do in your service and write, you own the copyright for it in Sweden.
Because I put this question in the table, and because in many universities, the tendency is that all goes to the university. And this, sometimes it's considered that it is pro-open access because the university can decide open access later. At the same time, this approach is against the author's autonomy, because we shall not neglect that it's the author who shall decide. So this is also a tricky question for the institutions, and from your intervention, I thought that maybe it was useful to mention. We have also a question from Elena Diomidi Parpouna. Could the open access be part of copyright law in the future? For instance, through the copyright exceptions? And this question, maybe Françoise could give an answer, or what do you think, Françoise?
Well, as I said, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a specialist in copyright. I was just reporting an experience. Yes, I guess it could be, but I think it's a long process to change a copyright directive, and it has just been done recently. I'm not sure it's going to be done again in the near future. However, the European Union is going to analyze this topic in order to have researchers retaining the copyright on their scientific works. But I can't tell whether it's going to be a provision in copyright law or whether they will find something more efficient, because we have seen that it's not so much efficient because these limitations in these provisions so far. So I cannot tell you more than that.
I could have only a comment regarding this question, that it's a very tricky question, because the real thing is what kind of exception this will be. Probably the type of exceptions that we have seen in the law of the Netherlands, of France, of Germany, also similar exceptions in hazing open actions can be found in Spain or in Italy. These are the kind of exceptions that we can see in copyright laws, but a broad exception regarding open access, that everything, it will be public and maybe even with remuneration or not, is a very big step in copyright law. So personally, I cannot see in the near future this kind of exception, of a very broad exception, but we can see small steps. And we have also recently seen the TDM exception. It's not very large, but it's here. We didn't have text and data mining exceptions before. We have, in some instances, broader educational exceptions, and the law goes like this with small steps, at least as far as now. We have also the comment of Dominic regarding the situation about the students in the UK that you can see also in the chat. And I also believe that the question of copyright law of students is also a question that has often been neglected by university policies. Moikia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eleni. Exactly what you said, I guess, is the major obstacle, that law goes step by step. So technological development is really fast, and this is what Prodromos was presenting, and enables many activities. But then, of course, we have to observe the legislation, and now we are confronted with this, with the legislation which was not conceived with fast computing or technical applications in mind, but with humans, how humans should be slowly organizing, carrying out processes and so on. So yeah, this is something I believe that legislation will stay and has to stay, because unfortunately, there's always somebody unethical. So we need some ethical frameworks, but it will have to be adapted to the modern possibilities like artificial intelligence.
Christina, also, would you like to add something?
Yes, I'm actually thinking about the word copyright. I'm thinking about our Swedish word and what our legal advisor would say about this. So, because it is like, it's about attribution and ethical, that you never lose your work or the attribution to your work. It's like you know, like a big Picasso work, which is in a museum and so forth. It will always be a Picasso. So that research will always be and that's what copyright actually is. Then when we talk about open access, open science is about how is it used. So we need to remember that. That's the difference. So you can never actually lose the copyright, but you do with some publishers, as we know, and they decide how it should be used. That's just a comment, what I was thinking about. Thank you.
It's a very interesting comment, and I shall also agree that the author shall always will have this link with the work, and neither the publishers, neither the organization, neither the employer can completely, let's say, cut off this link, because this is the real essence of copyright law. At the same time, it's for the author also to decide. Because this is also the part of the autonomy that any author, any creator shall have. This is her or his expression. A lot of issues regarding copyright law. Of course, the next big question is artificial intelligence and how we'll react regarding this, because we need publications, we need data also in order to feed the machine, in order to create this kind of patterns. So here we really we need to clarify some issues also regarding the output, and this is also the transparency issue and a lot of other questions. I think that if we continue the discussion with copyright law issues, we'll never end the discussion, because there are also questions that arise. If we don't have any other questions, I cannot see any other questions in the chat. I think that this is the time to close this session. I would like to thank you all. I would like to thank you, Françoise, to thank also Christina and also Prodromos, who cannot hear us, for this presentation. And I hope that this discussion and all these presentations were fruitful. I know that there were only one part of the whole copyright law issues, the big cake regarding this thorny relationship, but I believe that this discussion just give us some further thoughts on how to evolve this issue and how to consider how we deal with copyright law issues in our daily practice. Thank you very much, and to you all, and we have also the message from Laura, and maybe Laura or somebody else would like to take the floor. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Tatiana. No, I just wish to thank you all the speakers and all the participants for attending this seminar for 2 days, which was quite challenging for an online meeting. So it's really very, very much appreciated. And would like to thank you all the chairs, and just leave the floor to Raul to wrap up the meeting and maybe give some information about the future of the group. And just a reminder that we already published the presentations on the website. I think we are missing just 2 presentations, so participants can already download them from the web page of the seminar. And the video recordings will be uploaded early next week, so if you miss some parts you can still catch up. And we also invite the participants to fill out a short evaluation survey if possible, because this is helpful also to identify, not only for the evaluation of the seminar, but also to identify topics for possible future events of the UNICA Scholarly Communication Group. So thank you again, everybody, and Raul, the floor is yours now.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody. I think these 2 days of intensive seminar have been great. I only missed something, and it's that we are not in Cyprus. Those of you who are very good computers with good performance have been lucky and have been able to put the picture, not in my case. So you are more in Cyprus than me. But yes, I think we've had the opportunity to discuss many interesting things, many things that are really going on in our daily days, in our daily life and work in the universities. I think we need to face real challenges, but we have very good opportunities, in my opinion. Many things that might seem a threat in the end may be transformed or maybe become an opportunity. So we have been discussing in these sessions on how to support researchers better in open science, beyond just the open access of papers, which is something now really consolidated. We also discussed the importance of open access during the pandemics, thanks to unlocking content during those months where it wasn't possible to access physically the libraries. The generosity of institutions, the generosity of publishers, and also the hard work of librarians behind all that made this possible. We have also discussing the importance of some frameworks beyond the libraries, like the framework of the European Union yesterday with the European Open Science Landscape with Sylvia, or today with the EOSC Association by Wilhelm. earlier this morning. And also today we have been discussing interesting topics about licensing, about copyright, about how libraries can continue deepening the open access and the open science in the universities. This is not an easy task. For instance, when we were listening to our colleagues about the Plan S, Dominic presented how they have implemented a policy in the Edinburgh University. Maybe that's not the case in all of our universities. Maybe we need to not have this policy, this framework as a help. Maybe we need to continue work intensively with the researchers, Jake by Joel, trying to, if not educate, to make them more aware of the real challenges of open access. Because in the end, open access is something that will help us all. It's not the researchers, it's not the students, not the librarians, it's the society in general. And I think this seminar has been really interesting in putting us in perspective with that goal. So I think this has been successful, and especially because of the people that have been presenting today and yesterday. Thank you all for your commitment, and thank you all for sharing your insights. And thank you also the audience, because you have been part of this event, and you have really participating these 2 days. Online events always have the risk of people disconnecting somehow, but I know that you've been there the whole seminar. And in the end, the scholarly working group in UNICA is a work of everybody. I hope we can continue in this new phase with all of you. We are planning, Andreas and I will share information soon about that. We are planning to organize some webinars, some short events next year on some of the topics we already addressed in this seminar. For instance, the impact of transformative agreements, how to best support in data management processes at the universities, and to try to share and discover interesting initiatives on citizen science. So more news to come in the following months, and I hope you can all participate in them. So thank you again. And now I think Elena is going to say some goodbye words.
We lost Elena.
We lost Elena.
No?
But she asked the question in the chat.
Maybe she's
so I think she's here, no?
Yeah,
she just sent the message.
Yeah.
Elena, we are looking for you. No?
No?
Okay.
Let me see.
Elena, now you should be able to talk.
Yeah. Okay, so I just promoted her to panelist. I noticed that she was not. That's why she wasn't able to speak. Yeah, so it'll be fine now.
Sorry about that.
No, it's our fault.
Sorry. Do you see me?
No, only the library.
You can see a beautiful picture of the library. Yeah.
Okay. Now you will see me now. Sorry.
Yes.
I was disabled because I wasn't a panelist. So thank you very much for being with us today virtually in our library. I'm very happy to see your faces with our library background. It was also honor for us to be hosting this event. And unfortunately, you are not here with us, but we are looking forward to organize that in the near future physically. And considering the presentations, all of them were very interesting, very informative for all of us. And now when we are finishing, I feel that our role as librarians are always revised, moving from physical access support to virtual, and now the open access issue and projects are more demanding and even more difficult to combine the copyright laws, as Tatiana mentioned before, and the presentation. So we are looking for better support to the community we are served, either academic or publishing. And we are looking forward for new meetings. Thank you everybody for being with us.
Thank you.
From Cyprus.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Looking forward to be in Cyprus together.
Yes, yes. I wish to manage this event.
And many thanks again to all the colleagues from Cyprus who worked very hard on the hypothesis of a physical event and then had to switch to this second solution. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And also thank you to Françoise. She's also the soul of this event for organizing everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Listen to me. I see you.
Yeah.